Why do only 0.2% of the world's population control a disproportionate share of global wealth? Why have the Jewish people, through millennia of persecutions, dispersions, and countless new beginnings from nothing, consistently emerged as leaders in finance, science, the arts, and entrepreneurship? The answer is not found in conspiracy or luck. It lies in a prosperity consciousness system quietly passed down through generations. This audiobook reveals the timeless principles that transformed a wandering people into masters of abundance. It is not about religion, but about mental programming. It is not about rituals, but about neurological patterns. It is not about tradition, but about consciousness technology. You will discover how concepts such as Shabbat reprogram your mind for abundance, how the practice of tzedakah activates the universal laws of reciprocity, and how the philosophy of tikkun olam, repairing the world, aligns your energy with the infinite flow of prosperity. Each chapter unveils a specific principle of Jewish wisdom, translating it into modern language and practical application for your life. Through fascinating stories of families who rebuilt fortunes after the Holocaust, of immigrants who arrived with nothing and created empires, and of Kabbalistic principles that echo in the discoveries of quantum physics, you will understand that prosperity is not accidental. It is a frequency you can tune into. This is not a book about getting rich quick. It is about fundamentally transforming your relationship with abundance, reprogramming your deepest beliefs about money and value, and aligning your identity with the consciousness of unlimited prosperity. It is about understanding that wealth is not something you chase. It is something you become. Prepare to question everything you've been taught about money, and to discover the prosperity codes tested over 5,000 years of history. Chapter 1. The Consciousness of Abundance. The Mental DNA of Prosperity. Have you ever wondered why certain families seem to attract wealth generation after generation, while others remain trapped in cycles of financial struggle, regardless of how hard they work? The answer isn't in their bank accounts, their connections, or even their circumstances. It's in something far more profound, something that exists in the invisible realm of consciousness before it ever manifests as physical money. It's in their mental DNA, their prosperity operating system, the unconscious beliefs and patterns that determine what they can see, what they can receive, and ultimately, what they can become. Let me tell you about Rachel's grandmother. She arrived in New York in 1949 with nothing but a small suitcase and the clothes on her back. Everything else had been taken, destroyed, lost in the chaos of war. She spoke no English. She had no money, no connections, no safety net. By any logical measure, she should have lived a life of poverty and struggle. Instead, within 15 years, she owned 3 successful businesses. Within 25 years, she had put all 4 of her children through university. Within 30 years, she had created a foundation that still funds scholarships today. When Rachel asked her grandmother how she did it, the old woman smiled and said something that would change Rachel's life forever. "Darling, I never lost what mattered most. I carried the real treasure with me the whole time, right here in my mind." That treasure wasn't positive thinking or wishful fantasy. It was something far more tangible, far more powerful. It was a complete system of beliefs, attitudes, and mental patterns about prosperity that had been transmitted through her family for thousands of years. It was the consciousness of abundance, and it operated like an invisible blueprint that shaped every decision, every action, every response to circumstances. While others saw obstacles, she saw opportunities. While others felt scarcity, she felt flow. While others believed they had to fight for every scrap, she knew there was always enough and more coming. This is the secret that has allowed the Jewish people to thrive against impossible odds for 5,000 years. Through expulsions from over 80 countries, through systematic persecution, through the loss of everything material again and again, they maintained something that could never be taken away, a consciousness of prosperity so deeply embedded that it functions almost like genetic code, passed from generation to generation, creating patterns of success that seem miraculous to outside observers, but feel completely natural to those who carry them. Here's what most people misunderstand about wealth. They think it's about what you do. Work harder, get a better job, start a business, invest wisely. But all of those actions are downstream from something more fundamental. Your actions are determined by your beliefs. Your beliefs shape your perception. Your perception creates your reality. If your unconscious mind is programmed with scarcity, limitation, and fear around money, it doesn't matter how many strategies you learn or how hard you work. You'll sabotage yourself at every turn. You'll miss opportunities that are right in front of you. You'll find yourself back at the same level of struggle, wondering why nothing ever changes. The Jewish tradition understood this truth thousands of years before neuroscience could prove it. They understood that prosperity isn't something you chase, it's something you become. It's not about accumulating money, it's about transforming your identity into someone who naturally attracts, creates, and multiplies abundance. They built an entire system of practices, beliefs, and teachings designed specifically to program the mind for prosperity, to create neural pathways that automatically move toward abundance rather than away from it. Think about this. Modern neuroscience tells us that our brains are incredibly plastic, constantly rewiring themselves based on repeated thoughts and experiences. Every time you think a thought, you strengthen a neural pathway. Every time you feel an emotion, you create a chemical signature in your body. Every time you take an action from a particular state of consciousness, you reinforce that state. This means your brain is literally being programmed every single day, creating patterns that become automatic, unconscious, effortless. The question isn't whether you're being programmed. The question is, what are you being programmed for? Scarcity or abundance? Limitation or possibility? Fear or faith? The Jewish consciousness of abundance is built on several foundational beliefs that operate so deeply they're often invisible even to those who carry them. The first is this: the universe is fundamentally abundant. There is always enough. Not just barely enough, but more than enough. Overflowing sufficiency, infinite supply. This isn't naive optimism or spiritual bypassing. It's a core operating principle that changes everything. When you truly believe there is always enough, you stop operating from panic and desperation. You stop seeing life as a zero-sum game where someone else's gain is your loss. You start noticing opportunities that were always there but invisible to the scarcity-programmed mind. The second foundational belief is that you have intrinsic value regardless of your current circumstances. Your worth isn't determined by your bank account, your possessions, or your social status. You are valuable simply because you exist, because you carry within you unique gifts and capacities that the world needs. This belief creates a radically different relationship with money. Instead of seeking money to prove your worth, you naturally attract money because you're already operating from a place of worthiness. You don't beg, you don't grovel, you don't diminish yourself. You offer value because you are valuable, and you expect to be compensated fairly because that's the natural exchange. The third foundational belief is that wealth is meant to flow, not to stagnate. Money is like water. It needs to circulate to stay healthy. Hoarding creates stagnation. Generosity creates circulation. and circulation creates more abundance. This is why charitable giving isn't just a nice thing to do in Jewish tradition, it's considered essential to prosperity. The act of giving, especially when it feels slightly uncomfortable, signals to your unconscious mind that you have more than enough. It programs you for abundance rather than scarcity. It keeps your energy in a state of flow rather than fear. But here's where it gets really interesting. These beliefs aren't just philosophical concepts. They're encoded into daily practices, weekly rhythms, annual cycles, and life milestones. They're reinforced through stories told at dinner tables, through rituals performed in homes, through community celebrations and mutual support systems. They become so integrated into the fabric of life that they're absorbed unconsciously, especially by children who watch their parents and grandparents embody these principles naturally. Consider the practice of Shabbat, which we'll explore deeply in the next chapter. On the surface, it's a day of rest, but at a deeper level, it's a weekly reprogramming session for abundance consciousness. By stopping all work for a full day, you're telling your unconscious mind that your worth doesn't depend on your productivity. By celebrating regardless of your current circumstances, you're affirming that life is fundamentally good. By trusting that taking a full day off won't destroy your business or career, you're demonstrating faith in abundance rather than fear of scarcity. Every single week, this pattern is reinforced. Every single week, the neural pathways of abundance are strengthened. Or consider the approach to education. In Jewish culture, learning isn't just about getting a degree to get a job. It's considered the highest form of wealth because it's the only wealth that can never be taken away. You can lose your money, your property, your business. You can be forced to flee your country with nothing but the clothes on your back. But you can't lose what you know, what you've learned, the skills you've developed. This creates a radically different relationship with learning. Education becomes an investment in portable, permanent wealth. It becomes something you pursue with the same intensity that others might pursue money, because you understand that knowledge creates opportunities that generate wealth regardless of circumstance. The consciousness of abundance also changes how you perceive challenges and setbacks. When Rachel's grandmother lost everything in the war, she didn't see herself as a victim of circumstances. She saw herself as someone in between chapters, someone who had built success before and would build it again. The external circumstances had changed, but her internal operating system remained intact. She still knew how to create value, how to serve others, how to spot opportunities, how to build relationships, how to persist through difficulties. The money was gone, but the consciousness that created the money was still fully present. This is the crucial distinction that most people miss. They think wealthy people have money, but the truth is, wealthy people have wealth consciousness, and the money is simply the natural result of that consciousness. Take away the money, and if the consciousness remains, the money returns. But give money to someone with poverty consciousness, and it disappears faster than you can imagine. This is why lottery winners often end up broke within a few years. This is why inheritances can destroy families instead of blessing them. This is why some people can lose everything and rebuild within months, while others never recover from a single setback. Your consciousness is your true wealth. It's the mental and emotional patterns that determine what you notice, what you believe is possible, what actions you take, what you expect, what you accept, and what you reject. Change your consciousness, and your circumstances must follow. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. This is how the mind works. This is how reality is constructed. Your brain is constantly filtering billions of bits of sensory information, selecting what to pay attention to based on your beliefs and expectations. You literally see a different world than someone with a different consciousness. The opportunities you notice, they miss. The possibilities you feel excited about, they feel intimidated by. The risks you're willing to take, they can't even imagine. So how do you transform your consciousness from scarcity to abundance? How do you reprogram the deep patterns that have been running your life, often since childhood? This is what the rest of this book is about. Each chapter will reveal a specific principle from Jewish wisdom and show you exactly how it works to reprogram your mind for prosperity. You'll discover practices that have been tested across thousands of years and millions of people, refined through countless challenges and proven in every imaginable circumstance. But I want you to understand something crucial right now before we go any further. This transformation is possible for you. It doesn't matter what your background is, what your current circumstances are, what mistakes you've made, or how many times you've tried and failed before. The consciousness of abundance isn't genetic, it's learned. It's transmitted through teaching and practice, through repetition and reinforcement, through decision and commitment. If Rachel's grandmother could carry it through hell itself and use it to rebuild everything from nothing, then you can certainly develop it from wherever you are right now. The question is, are you willing to let go of the scarcity programming that feels so familiar? Are you willing to challenge the beliefs about money and worth that you've carried your whole life? Are you willing to try on a completely different operating system and see what becomes possible? Because here's the truth. You can't create abundance from scarcity consciousness. You can't manifest prosperity while believing in limitation. You can't become wealthy while feeling poor. The transformation must happen first in your mind, in your beliefs, in your sense of identity. Then, and only then, does the external world reorganize itself to match your internal reality. This is the secret that Rachel's grandmother knew. This is the treasure she carried through impossible circumstances. This is the inheritance she passed down to her children and grandchildren. And this is what you're about to claim for yourself. Not through magical thinking or empty affirmations, but through a systematic reprogramming of your deepest beliefs and patterns, using principles that have created prosperity for thousands of years across every imaginable circumstance. You're not learning how to get rich. You're learning how to become someone for whom prosperity is natural, inevitable, and permanent. You're not acquiring techniques. You're transforming your identity. You're not chasing abundance. You're aligning yourself with the infinite flow that has always been present, waiting for you to recognize it, accept it, and allow it to express itself through your life. The consciousness of abundance is your birthright. It's not reserved for a chosen few. It's available to anyone willing to do the inner work of transformation. It's waiting for you right now, in this moment, to make the decision that everything is about to change. Not because your circumstances will magically shift overnight, but because you're about to shift. And when you shift, everything shifts with you. Welcome to the most important journey of your life. Welcome to the transformation from scarcity to abundance, from limitation to possibility, from struggle to flow. Welcome to the consciousness that has created miracles for 5,000 years and is about to create miracles in your life. Let's begin. Chapter 2. Shabbat, the power of stopping to prosper. There's a paradox at the heart of prosperity that most people never understand. The harder you chase it, the more it eludes you. The more desperately you work, hustle, and grind without pause, the further you push abundance away. It's like trying to catch water in your fists by squeezing harder. The tighter you grip, the faster it flows through your fingers. This is why one of the most powerful prosperity practices ever created seems, on the surface, to be the exact opposite of what you'd expect. It's not about doing more. It's about stopping completely. Every Friday evening as the sun begins to set, millions of people around the world engage in what might be the most counterintuitive wealth-building practice in human history. They stop working. Completely. For a full 25 hours, they cease all productive activity. No emails, no business calls, no projects, no hustle. In our modern world, where everyone is glorifying the grind, celebrating sleepless nights, and wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor, this practice seems almost reckless. How can you afford to take a full day off every single week? What about the opportunities you'll miss? What about the competitors who are working while you rest? What about the momentum you'll lose? But here's what's actually happening during Shabbat, and why it's one of the most sophisticated consciousness programming tools ever developed. You're teaching your nervous system that your value doesn't depend on your productivity. You're rewiring your brain to operate from abundance rather than scarcity. You're creating space for the invisible work of manifestation to occur. You're aligning yourself with the natural rhythm of creation itself, which alternates between action and rest, expansion and integration, doing and being. Let me tell you about David, a client who came to me burned out, broke, and broken. He was a real estate agent working 7 days a week, available to clients 24 hours a day, convinced that if he just worked harder and longer than everyone else, he'd finally break through to the success he was chasing. Instead, he was exhausted. His relationships were falling apart, and despite all his effort, his income had been declining for 2 years. He was living proof that hard work alone doesn't create prosperity. In fact, hard work from a state of desperation, fear, and depletion often creates the opposite. I asked David to try something that seemed insane to him. Take every Saturday completely off. No work, no exception. He looked at me like I'd suggested he burn his business down. "I can't afford to take a day off," he said. "I'm already struggling. I need to work more, not less." But I explained to him what I'm about to explain to you. His constant grinding was creating a consciousness of scarcity that was repelling the very prosperity he was chasing. His nervous system was stuck in survival mode, operating from fear and desperation, and that energy was seeping into every interaction, every presentation, every negotiation. People could feel it, even if they couldn't name it, and it was pushing them away. Reluctantly, David agreed to try it for 4 weeks. The first Saturday was torture for him. He felt guilty, anxious, convinced he was making a terrible mistake. But by the 3rd week, something started shifting. He noticed he felt different when he returned to work on Sunday. He was calmer, clearer, more creative. Ideas came more easily. He enjoyed his work again instead of grinding through it. By the 8th week, his income had increased by 40%. By 6 months, he'd doubled his previous year's earnings while working fewer hours. What changed? Not his tactics, not his strategies, not his work ethic. His consciousness changed. He stopped operating from scarcity and started operating from abundance, and everything else followed. Shabbat works because it addresses something fundamental about how your brain processes reality and creates your experience of life. Your nervous system has 2 primary modes: sympathetic, which is your fight-or-flight stress response, and parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest relaxation response. When you're in chronic stress, constantly pushing and striving without pause, your sympathetic nervous system dominates. Your brain literally narrows its focus to threats and problems. Your creativity shuts down. Your ability to see opportunities diminishes. Your decision-making becomes reactive rather than strategic. You're essentially operating with a fraction of your mental capacity, grinding away with the parking brake on. But when you intentionally create space for rest, for ease, for stopping. You activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Your brain shifts into a completely different mode of operation. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online, giving you access to higher-level thinking, creativity, and strategic planning. Your field of awareness expands, allowing you to notice opportunities and connections you were blind to before. Your body begins to heal and regenerate. Your emotional state shifts from anxiety and stress to peace and confidence. And here's the crucial part. This state of being is magnetic. When you're operating from rest rather than stress, from abundance rather than scarcity, from confidence rather than desperation, you naturally attract better opportunities, better relationships, better outcomes. This is the hidden technology of Shabbat. It's not just a nice religious practice or a quaint tradition. It's a neurological reset button, pressed weekly, that keeps you from getting trapped in the scarcity consciousness that destroys prosperity. It's a forced interruption of the patterns that keep most people stuck in struggle. It's a weekly reminder that the universe doesn't need your constant effort to function, that there's an intelligence and flow far greater than your individual will, and that your role is to align with that flow rather than fight against it through sheer force. Think about the act of creation in the Genesis story, regardless of whether you take it literally or metaphorically. 6 days of creation, followed by 1 day of rest. Not because God was tired, but because rest is part of the creative cycle itself. Creation requires both action and integration, both doing and being, both expansion and consolidation. Without the pause, without the space, without the rest, creation becomes chaotic and unsustainable. The same principle applies to your life and your prosperity. If you're constantly in action mode, constantly pushing and striving, you never create space for integration, for the invisible work of manifestation, for the universe to deliver what you've been working toward. Here's what most people don't understand about manifestation. The actual creation happens in the space between actions, not during the actions themselves. Your actions plant seed, but the growth happens in the unseen realm when you step back and allow it. When you're constantly digging up the seed to check if it's growing, you prevent the very growth you're anxious to see. Shabbat is the practice of stepping back, of trusting the process, of allowing the invisible forces of creation to work while you rest in faith rather than striving in fear. The practice also rewires your relationship with time itself. When you're trapped in scarcity consciousness, time feels like your enemy. There's never enough of it. You're always behind, always rushing, always stressed about what you haven't done yet. But when you can take an entire day every week and do absolutely nothing productive, you're making a radical statement. Time is abundant. There's enough time for everything that matters. You don't need to squeeze every second dry. This shift in your relationship with time changes everything. You become more present, more focused, more effective during your working hours. You stop wasting energy on anxiety about time and start investing that energy in actual creative work. Let me tell you about Sarah, a corporate executive who discovered Shabbat accidentally during a forced sabbatical after a health crisis. For 20 years, she'd worked 60 to 70 hours a week, convinced that's what it took to stay competitive. She'd missed her children's milestones, sacrificed her health, and barely maintained her marriage, all in service of a career that, while successful by external measures, left her feeling empty and exhausted. The health crisis forced her to stop completely for 3 months, and during that time, she discovered what happened when she wasn't constantly doing. The first few weeks were hell. She didn't know who she was without her work. She felt guilty, useless, anxious. But as the weeks passed, something extraordinary happened. She started noticing things she'd been blind to for years. She reconnected with her creativity. She remembered dreams she'd abandoned. She felt emotions she'd been suppressing. And most surprisingly, she started getting insights about her work that were far more valuable than anything she'd come up with during her years of constant grinding. When she returned to work, she implemented a strict boundary. No work on Saturdays, no exceptions. Her colleagues thought she was committing career suicide. Instead, within a year, she'd been promoted to a position that had previously seemed impossible to reach, and she was working fewer hours than ever before. What Sarah discovered is what the practice of Shabbat has been teaching for thousands of years. Your best work doesn't come from constant effort. It comes from the integration of effort and rest, action and reflection, doing and being. When you create regular space for rest, you give your unconscious mind time to process, integrate, and synthesize everything you've been learning and experiencing. You give your creative intelligence space to emerge. You give the universe space to deliver the opportunities and connections you've been working toward. But Shabbat isn't just about personal benefit. It's also a practice of trust and faith, and these qualities are absolutely essential for prosperity consciousness. When you stop working for a full day every week, especially when business is slow or money is tight, you're making a declaration of faith. I trust that the universe will provide. I trust that my value doesn't depend on my constant productivity. I trust that there's enough, and there will continue to be enough. This might sound like spiritual bypassing or naive optimism, but it's actually a profound reprogramming of your deepest beliefs about security and provision. Most people's scarcity consciousness comes from a fundamental lack of trust. They don't trust that they're valuable. They don't trust that the universe is supportive. They don't trust that there's enough to go around. So they grip, control, hoard, and overwork, trying to force security through their own effort alone. But this very gripping is what prevents the flow of abundance. It's like trying to receive while your fists are clenched shut. Shabbat is the practice of opening your hands, literally and metaphorically, and trusting that what you need will come. Here's the practical magic of this. When you operate from trust rather than fear, from abundance rather than scarcity, you show up differently in every interaction. Your energy changes. Your presence changes. People respond to you differently. Opportunities appear that were always there but invisible to the scarcity-focused mind. You make better decisions because you're not operating from desperation. You attract better partnerships because you're not clinging and grasping. You create better outcomes because you're aligned with flow rather than fighting against it. The rhythm of Shabbat also creates something else that's crucial for sustained prosperity: sustainability. Most people approach wealth building like a sprint when it's actually a marathon. They burn themselves out in a few years of intense effort, then spend the next few years recovering, then repeat the cycle. This creates an exhausting roller coaster of boom and bust, success and burnout, progress and collapse. But when you build rest into your rhythm from the beginning, when you make it non-negotiable and regular, you create a sustainable pace that you can maintain for decades. You're playing the long game, building wealth that lasts, rather than chasing quick wins that evaporate. Think about the most successful people you know, truly successful, not just wealthy but fulfilled, not just productive but peaceful. Almost without exception, they've mastered the art of strategic rest. They understand that peak performance requires recovery. They know that clarity comes from space, not from constant mental activity. They've learned that creativity emerges in stillness, not in chaos. They've discovered what Shabbat has been teaching for millennia. Stopping is not the opposite of productivity. It's the foundation of sustainable, joyful, abundant productivity. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to adopt Shabbat in its traditional religious form, unless that resonates with you, but I am inviting you to consider the principle. What would happen if you took one full day every week and did absolutely nothing related to work or productivity? No emails, no planning, no hustling, no business calls. Just rest, joy, connection, celebration, presence. What would that do to your nervous system? What would that communicate to your unconscious mind? What would that shift in your energy and consciousness? Most people resist this idea because they're afraid. They're afraid they can't afford it. They're afraid they'll fall behind. They're afraid their business will collapse or their career will stall. But this fear itself is the problem. This fear is the scarcity consciousness that's blocking your prosperity. When you can face that fear, challenge it, and act in defiance of it by resting anyway, you're literally reprogramming your deepest beliefs about security, provision, and value. Start small if you need to. Maybe you can't imagine taking a full day off right now. That's okay. Start with a few hours. Every Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon, or whatever day works for you, create a window of time where you do absolutely nothing productive. No checking your phone for business messages, no thinking about work problems, no planning your week. Just be, rest, enjoy, connect with people you love. Move your body in ways that feel good. Create something for pure joy with no goal or outcome. Read something that feeds your soul. Sit in nature and do absolutely nothing. Notice what happens. Notice the resistance that comes up. Notice the guilt, the anxiety, the voice that says you should be doing something productive. Don't fight these feelings. Just notice them. They're the scarcity programming revealing itself, and awareness is the first step in transforming it. Keep practicing. Week after week, create this space for rest. And as you do, pay attention to what shifts in your life. Not just in your bank account, though that may shift too, but in your energy, your creativity, your clarity, your relationships, your sense of peace and well-being. This is the power of stopping to prosper. This is the wisdom encoded in Shabbat. This is the practice that has sustained prosperity consciousness through thousands of years of challenges and changes. You don't create abundance by working yourself into the ground. You create abundance by aligning yourself with the natural rhythm of creation, which includes rest as an essential component. You prosper not despite stopping, but because of stopping. The pause creates the space. The space creates the integration. The integration creates the transformation, and the transformation creates the prosperity you've been chasing through all your striving. Your worthiness isn't measured by your productivity. Your value isn't determined by your output. Your security doesn't depend on your constant vigilance. These are lies that scarcity consciousness tells you to keep you trapped in exhausting cycles of fear and struggle. The truth is simpler and more liberating. You are inherently valuable. The universe is fundamentally abundant, and your prosperity flows most easily when you're aligned with natural rhythms of both action and rest. Shabbat is the practice that keeps you aligned with this truth, week after week, year after year, until it becomes so deeply embedded in your consciousness that prosperity becomes your natural state of being. Stop chasing. Start allowing. Stop grinding. Start flowing. Stop proving. Start resting. This is the paradoxical path to prosperity that Shabbat teaches. This is the wisdom that has created sustainable wealth for thousands of years. This is the practice that will transform your relationship with work, worth, and wealth from the inside out. All you have to do is stop, regularly, completely, trustingly, and watch what unfolds in the space you create. Chapter 3. Tzedakah, the law of circulation and multiplication. There's a financial principle that seems to defy all logic, contradict every instinct of self-preservation, and violate the basic laws of mathematics. It says that the fastest way to increase your wealth is to give it away. Not someday when you're rich enough. Not the leftover scraps after you've taken care of everything else, but now. Regularly, systematically, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when you're not sure you can afford it. This principle is called tzedakah, and it's one of the most powerful prosperity technologies ever discovered. Most people approach giving from a place of guilt or obligation. They donate when they're asked, feel good for a moment, and then go back to their normal patterns of thinking about money. But tzedakah isn't charity in the way we typically understand it. The word doesn't even translate to charity. It translates to righteousness or justice. It's not about being generous or nice. It's about participating in the fundamental law of circulation that governs all abundance in the universe. It's about recognizing that wealth is meant to flow, not to stagnate, and that you position yourself in that flow through the act of giving. Let me tell you about Michael, a struggling entrepreneur who came to one of my workshops completely broke. He was 3 months behind on rent, his business was failing, and he was seriously considering giving up on his dreams and getting a regular job. During the workshop, I talked about tzedakah, about giving 10% of your income, regardless of your circumstances. Michael raised his hand and said what everyone in his situation thinks. That's easy to say when you have money. I literally can't afford to give anything away right now. I need every dollar just to survive. I looked at him and asked a question that changed his life. Can you afford 10% of nothing? He looked confused. So I continued. If you maintain your current consciousness, your current relationship with money, your current energy of scarcity and desperation, where will you be in 6 months? He thought about it and admitted he'd probably be in the same place, or worse. So you're already giving everything away, I said. You're giving it to fear, to scarcity, to the belief that there's not enough. The question isn't whether you can afford to give. The question is whether you can afford not to. Something shifted in Michael that day. He didn't have much, but he committed to giving 10% of whatever came in, no matter how small. The first week, he made $80 from a small freelance project. He took $8 and gave it to a homeless veteran he passed every day. It felt significant, even painful. That $8 could have bought him lunch for 2 days. But he did it anyway, and something happened that he couldn't explain. Within 3 days, a client he'd pitched months ago suddenly called and hired him for a project worth $3,000. Coincidence? Maybe, but it kept happening. Over the next 6 months, Michael religiously gave away 10% of every dollar that came in, and the dollars kept coming, faster and in larger amounts than ever before. Within a year, his business was thriving. Within 2 years, he was earning more than he'd ever imagined possible. What changed? Not his skills, not his market, not his circumstances. His consciousness changed. He went from operating in scarcity to operating in abundance, and the giving was the mechanism that created that shift. Here's what's actually happening when you practice tzedakah. You're sending a powerful signal to your unconscious mind and to the universe itself. You're declaring that you have more than enough. You're affirming that you trust the flow of abundance. You're positioning yourself as a channel for prosperity rather than a dam that blocks it. Your unconscious mind takes this signal and begins to reorganize your entire experience of reality around it. You start noticing opportunities you were blind to before. You start feeling worthy of receiving more. You start showing up with an energy that attracts abundance rather than repels it. But there's more to it than just psychology. There's a genuine universal principle at work. What some call the law of reciprocity, others call karma, and quantum physics might describe as the interconnectedness of all things. When you give, You create a vacuum that must be filled. Nature abhors a vacuum. The universe abhors a vacuum. Energy flows toward empty spaces. By giving, by creating that space, you're literally making room for more to come in. You're demonstrating that you're not a closed system hoarding resources, but an open channel through which abundance can flow. Think about the wealthiest people in the world. Almost without exception, they're not the ones clutching their money in fear. They're the ones who give generously, who fund foundations, who support causes, who invest in others. Are they giving because they're rich, or are they rich because they give? It's both. The giving and the receiving are part of the same flow. You can't have one without the other. The moment you try to receive without giving, you block the flow. The moment you try to accumulate without circulating, you create stagnation, and stagnation is the enemy of prosperity. Jewish tradition specifies that tzedakah should be 10% of your income, given before you pay your other expenses. Not 10% of what's left over, but 10% right off the top. This order is crucial because it forces you to prioritize abundance consciousness over scarcity consciousness. It makes you put your trust in flow before your fear of lack. It requires you to act in faith rather than operate from worry. And this act of faith, repeated consistently, rewires your entire relationship with money and security. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about your bills, your debts, your responsibilities. You're thinking that maybe this principle works for other people, but your situation is different. You're thinking you'll start giving when you have more, when you're more secure, when you're caught up on everything else. But that's exactly the conscience that keeps you trapped in scarcity. As long as you're waiting to have enough before you give, you're affirming that you don't have enough, and that affirmation creates your reality. Let me tell you about Rebecca, a single mother working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. She heard about tzedakah and decided to try it, even though every logical part of her brain screamed that she couldn't afford it. She calculated 10% of her monthly income and set up an automatic transfer to a charity she cared about. The first month was terrifying. She had to get creative with her budget, had to say no to some things, had to trust in a way she'd never trusted before. But something shifted. She felt different. She felt more powerful, more in control, less like a victim of circumstances. Within 3 months, she got an unexpected raise. Within 6 months, an opportunity for a better-paying position opened up that hadn't existed before. Within a year, she was earning 50% more than when she started, and the 10% she was giving away was now more than her entire previous monthly income had been. She hadn't just increased her money. She'd transformed her entire relationship with it. She'd gone from feeling poor while earning little to feeling abundant while giving away thousands. The external numbers changed, but the internal transformation was what made it possible. The practice of tzedakah also does something else that's crucial for prosperity. It keeps you from developing what I call wealthy poverty. You know what I'm talking about. Those people who have money but live in constant fear of losing it, who have abundance but feel scarcity, who are rich on paper but poor in spirit. They've accumulated wealth, but they haven't developed wealth consciousness. They're still operating from the same fear and scarcity they had when they were broke, just with more zeros in the bank account. And ironically, this consciousness often leads to losing the wealth they've accumulated, because they can't sustain what doesn't match their consciousness. Tzedakah prevents this by keeping you in the flow. No matter how much you accumulate, you're always giving, always circulating, always participating in the movement of energy. This keeps your consciousness aligned with abundance, rather than allowing it to contract back into scarcity and fear. It's a protection against the very real danger of having money, but losing your soul, of gaining wealth, but sacrificing your humanity, of becoming successful but miserable. Now here's an important distinction. Tzedakah isn't about giving randomly or impulsively. It's strategic, intentional, systematic. You decide on a percentage, typically 10%, and you give it consistently, no matter what. You don't give based on how you feel, or whether you think you can afford it that month, or whether a particularly compelling request comes your way. You give as a practice, as a discipline, as a fundamental part of your financial operating system. This consistency is what creates the transformation in consciousness. Random acts of generosity feel good, but they don't reprogram your deepest beliefs about abundance. You also want to be intentional about where you give. Give to causes that resonate with your values, that align with the world you want to create, that reflect the consciousness you want to embody. Give to organizations that use resources well, that create real impact, that treat their mission and their beneficiaries with respect and dignity. Your giving should feel meaningful to you, not obligatory or guilt-driven. When you give with joy and intention, the energetic impact is exponentially greater than when you give from duty or pressure. Some people ask whether tzedakah only counts if you give to recognized charities, or if it can include helping individuals directly. The traditional answer is that both count, as long as the giving is genuine and serves a real need. The homeless person who needs a meal, the friend struggling with medical bills, the stranger whose car broke down, the artist creating beauty in the world. All of these can be recipients of tzedakah if the giving comes from a place of genuine desire to support and serve, rather than from ego or the desire to control. But here's where it gets interesting. Tzedakah isn't just about money. The principle of circulation applies to all forms of value. Your time, your knowledge, your connections, your skills, your attention, your energy. Everything you have is meant to flow, to be shared, to circulate. When you hoard any form of value, you create blockage in your prosperity. When you give freely of all you have, you create flow in all areas of your life. Think about the people you know who are genuinely generous with their time, knowledge, and connections. They're almost always the most successful people you know. Not because they're successful and therefore can afford to be generous, but because their generosity creates the conditions for success. They're well-connected because they connect others. They're knowledgeable because they share knowledge freely. They're sought after because they give freely. They've understood that giving and receiving are the same flow, just different directions of the same energy. Let me tell you about David, not the real estate agent from the previous chapter, but a venture capitalist who built his fortune on the principle of radical generosity. Early in his career, when he was just starting out and didn't have much, he made it a practice to help everyone who asked for advice, to make introductions whenever he could, to share opportunities even when he could have kept them for himself. People told him he was naive, that he was giving away his competitive advantage, that he needed to protect his interests. But David understood something they didn't. There is no competitive advantage in a universe of abundance. The only advantage is alignment with flow. Over the years, David's generosity created a network of people who trusted him, valued him, and wanted to work with him. Opportunities came to him first because people knew he would share them generously. Deals succeeded because all parties trusted his integrity. Investments flourished because he brought together the right people with the right resources at the right time. His wealth multiplied, not despite his generosity, but because of it. He'd tapped into the fundamental law of circulation, and it had made him not just wealthy, but fulfilled, not just successful, but significant. This is the secret that tzedakah teaches. Prosperity isn't a finite pie that you need to grab your slice of before it's gone. Prosperity is an infinite flow that you access by becoming a clear channel for it. The more you give, the more you receive. The more you circulate, the more circulates through you. The more you trust the flow, the more the flow trusts you with abundance. It's not magic, it's mechanics. It's not wishful thinking, it's universal law. It's not religious dogma, it's practical wisdom tested across thousands of years and millions of lives. So here's what I want you to do. Decide right now on a percentage of your income that you'll give away consistently. If 10% feels impossible, start with 5%, or 3%, or even 1%. The specific number matters less than the consistency and the consciousness behind it. Set up a system that makes it automatic, that takes the decision-making out of the equation. Every time money comes in, before you pay any other bill or expense, give your chosen percentage. Don't think about it, don't debate it, don't make exceptions. Just do it. And as you do this, pay attention to what happens. Not just externally, though you'll likely see changes there too. Pay attention to what happens internally. Notice how you feel different about money. Notice how your energy shifts. Notice opportunities that appear. Notice connections that form. Notice how your sense of security changes from being based on how much you have to being based on your trust in the flow. Notice how you move from poverty consciousness to prosperity consciousness, from scarcity to abundance, from fear to faith. This is the transformative power of tzedakah. This is the law of circulation and multiplication that has created sustainable prosperity for thousands of years. This is the practice that will shift you from being someone who chases wealth to someone who channels it, from someone who hoards in fear to someone who gives in trust, from someone who believes in scarcity to someone who knows abundance as their birthright. All you have to do is give, consistently and courageously, and watch as the universe gives back to you in measures beyond what you can imagine. The flow is always there, always available, always ready to fill you and flow through you. All you have to do is open your hands, open your heart, and become the channel you were always meant to be. Chapter 4. Education as Sacred Investment. The true asset that no one can take away. Imagine losing everything. Your home, your business, your savings, your possessions, everything you've spent years building. You're forced to flee with nothing but the clothes on your back, to start over in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, don't know anyone, and have no connections. What would you have left? What could you carry with you that would give you the power to rebuild? This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is the reality that Jewish people have faced repeatedly throughout history. And the answer they discovered is the foundation of one of the most powerful prosperity principles ever developed. The only wealth that truly matters is the wealth you carry in your mind. There's a reason why Jewish families have historically invested heavily in education, often sacrificing enormously to ensure their children receive the best learning possible. It's not about status or prestige. It's not about having impressive credentials to show off. It's about survival and prosperity in a world where everything external can be taken away at any moment. Education is the ultimate portable wealth, the one asset that travels with you wherever you go, that can't be confiscated by governments, stolen by thieves, or destroyed by disasters. It's wealth that actually appreciates over time rather than depreciating. It's wealth that compounds, multiplies, and creates opportunities indefinitely. Let me tell you about Hannah's grandfather, a man who arrived in America in 1938 with literally nothing. He'd been a successful businessman in Germany, owned property, had investments, lived comfortably. Then everything was taken. His business was seized, his property confiscated, His bank accounts frozen. He escaped with his life and nothing else. But here's what he did have. He had a doctorate in chemistry. He spoke 4 languages. He had studied business and finance. He understood engineering principles, and he had trained his mind to solve problems creatively. Within 5 years of arriving in America, he'd started a chemical company. Within 10 years, he'd become wealthy again. Within 20 years, he was wealthier than he'd been in Germany. When Hannah asked him how he did it, he said something she never forgot. They took everything I owned, but they couldn't take what I knew. They took my money, but they couldn't take my education. They took my past, but they couldn't take my capacity to create a future. That's why I insisted your mother get the best education possible, and why I'm insisting the same for you, because knowledge is the only true wealth. Everything else is just temporary. This principle runs so deep in Jewish culture that there's a traditional saying, if you have to sell everything you own, even the roof over your head, to pay for your child's education, you do it. This isn't about being impractical or irresponsible. It's about understanding what real security looks like. Real security isn't in your bank account, your property, or your possessions. Real security is in your capacity to create value, to solve problems, to adapt to changing circumstances, to see opportunities where others see obstacles. And that capacity comes from education, from knowledge, from the development of your mind. But here's what most people misunderstand about this principle. Education doesn't just mean formal schooling or academic degrees. It means the continuous, lifelong pursuit of knowledge and skills that increase your capacity to create value in the world. It means reading extensively, studying diverse subjects, learning from multiple sources, developing new capabilities, expanding your understanding. It means investing in yourself as enthusiastically as you would invest in any external asset, understanding that you are the asset, and everything else flows from what you know and what you can do. Think about the wealthiest people in the world. They're not the ones who stopped learning after school. They're voracious learners, constantly reading, studying, exploring new ideas, seeking new perspectives. Warren Buffett spends 5 to 6 hours a day reading. Bill Gates reads 50 books a year. Oprah Winfrey calls books her pathway to personal freedom. These people understand something fundamental. In a rapidly changing world, your knowledge and skills either grow or become obsolete. There is no standing still. You're either learning and expanding, or you're falling behind. Now let me tell you about Marcus, a client who came to me frustrated because he'd been stuck at the same income level for 5 years. He was working hard, putting in the hours, doing everything he thought he should be doing, but nothing was changing. When I asked him about his personal development, about what he was learning, what skills he was developing, what knowledge he was acquiring, he looked at me blankly. "I don't have time for that," he said. "I'm too busy working." And there was the problem. He was so busy doing that he had no time for becoming. He was stuck in a loop of executing the same level of skills over and over, expecting different results. I challenged Marcus to invest at least 1 hour every day in learning something new. Read books about business, psychology, communication, leadership. Take online courses. Listen to podcasts. Watch educational videos. Study people who had achieved what he wanted to achieve. He resisted at first, insisting he couldn't afford the time. But I pointed out that he couldn't afford not to. His current knowledge and skills had taken him as far as they could. If he wanted different results, he needed to become a different person, someone with expanded capabilities and deeper understanding. Marcus committed to the practice, and within 6 months, everything changed. Not because he learned some magic trick or secret strategy, but because his expanded knowledge gave him new ways of seeing problems, new approaches to solutions, new connections between ideas. He started having insights he'd never had before. He started seeing opportunities he'd been blind to. He started creating value in ways that hadn't been possible with his previous level of knowledge. His income doubled within a year, and it's continued to grow consistently ever since, because he's continued to grow consistently. This is the transformative power of treating education as sacred investment. Every book you read, every course you take, every skill you develop, every piece of knowledge you acquire becomes part of your internal wealth, your permanent prosperity foundation. Unlike money that can be spent or lost, knowledge compounds. Each new piece of learning connects with everything you already know, creating exponentially more value than the sum of its parts. You become increasingly capable, increasingly valuable, increasingly able to create abundance regardless of external circumstances. Jewish tradition has a beautiful concept called Torah study, which on the surface is about religious texts, but at a deeper level is about the practice of constant learning as a spiritual discipline. The idea is that studying, questioning, debating, and deepening your understanding isn't just about acquiring information. It's about developing your mind, sharpening your thinking, expanding your consciousness. Every hour spent in genuine learning makes you more than you were before. Every piece of wisdom integrated into your understanding increases your capacity to navigate life successfully. But here's the crucial part. The learning has to be applied. Knowledge without application is just information. It's potential energy that never converts to kinetic energy. The Jewish approach to education has always emphasized practical wisdom, knowledge that can be used to improve life, solve problems, create value. This is why Jewish scholars weren't just theoretical philosophers. They were often business people, physicians, scientists, inventors. They understood that the purpose of learning wasn't to accumulate facts, but to develop capabilities that could be applied in the real world. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman who transformed her entire life through strategic education. She was working as a secretary, earning barely enough to support herself, feeling trapped in a dead-end situation. But instead of just complaining about her circumstances or waiting for someone to rescue her, she decided to invest in herself. She started taking online courses in digital marketing, spending every evening after work learning new skills. She read every book she could find on the subject. She practiced by offering free services to small businesses, building a portfolio of real results. Within a year, she'd learned enough to start freelancing on the side. Within 2 years, she'd built up enough clients to quit her secretarial job and work for herself. Within 3 years, she was earning 5 times what she'd made as a secretary. Within 5 years, she'd built an agency with multiple employees. The money she'd invested in courses and books was less than $5,000. The return on that investment was literally life-changing, multiplying her income many times over and continuing to compound year after year. But more importantly, she'd transformed her identity from someone who felt powerless and limited to someone who knew she could create opportunities through her own capabilities. This is what education as sacred investment means. It means recognizing that the most profitable investment you'll ever make is in yourself, in your knowledge, in your skills, in your capacity to create value. It means prioritizing learning even when you're busy, especially when you're busy, because that's when you most need the expanded perspectives and capabilities that learning provides. It means being willing to invest money in courses, books, mentors, and experiences that will increase your knowledge, understanding that this investment will return exponentially more than any other investment you could make. Think about how most people approach their finances. They'll spend thousands of dollars on things that depreciate immediately, on entertainment that provides a few hours of distraction, on possessions that lose value the moment they're purchased. But they'll hesitate to spend $100 on a book or a course that could transform their understanding and capabilities permanently. They'll complain about not having opportunities while refusing to invest in developing the knowledge and skills that would allow them to recognize and create opportunities. This is backwards, and it's one of the main reasons why most people stay stuck while a small percentage continuously advances. The Jewish approach is radically different. Education isn't an expense. It's the highest form of investment. It's not something you do if you have extra money left over. It's something you prioritize above almost everything else, because they understand from thousands of years of experience that external wealth is temporary and vulnerable, but internal wealth, the wealth of knowledge and capability, is permanent and portable. They understand that you can lose everything and rebuild if you have knowledge, but you can have everything and lose it if you lack wisdom. Here's another dimension of this principle that's crucial. Education isn't just about practical skills or business knowledge. It's about developing your mind in all directions, becoming a more complete human being with broader understanding, deeper wisdom, more sophisticated thinking. Study philosophy, psychology, history, science, art, literature. Learn about human nature, about how societies function, about how ideas shape reality. Develop your aesthetic sense, your ethical reasoning, your creative capacity. All of this makes you more valuable, not just in the marketplace, but in life itself. There's a reason why so many Jewish intellectuals have made groundbreaking contributions across diverse fields. It's not genetic superiority. It's cultural emphasis on learning for its own sake, on intellectual curiosity as a virtue, on questioning and debate as valuable practices. This creates minds that are flexible, creative, capable of making unexpected connections, able to transfer learning from one domain to another. These are the qualities that create breakthrough innovations, that solve previously unsolvable problems, that generate enormous value in the world. Now, I want to address something important. I'm not suggesting you need to go back to school or get formal degrees, though that may be valuable depending on your situation and goals. What I'm suggesting is that you need to become a perpetual student of life, someone who's always learning, always growing, always expanding their capabilities. In today's world, you have access to more knowledge than any human beings in history. You can take courses from the world's best teachers for free or very little cost. You can read the wisdom of the greatest minds that have ever lived. You can learn any skill, study any subject, explore any field of knowledge from your computer or phone. The only question is, will you? Will you prioritize this sacred investment in yourself? Will you treat your mind as the most valuable asset you have? Will you dedicate time, energy, and resources to continuously expanding your knowledge and capabilities? Or will you stay comfortable with what you already know, watching the world change around you while your skills become increasingly obsolete? Let me tell you what happens when you commit to this principle. You become more confident because you know that your value isn't dependent on your current job or circumstances. You become more creative because your expanded knowledge gives you more raw material to work with. You become more valuable because you can contribute in ways that others can't. You become more adaptable because you have more tools in your mental toolkit. You become more successful because success is fundamentally about solving problems and creating value, and knowledge dramatically increases your capacity to do both. You also develop what I call opportunity literacy, the ability to recognize opportunities that others miss. Opportunities aren't really rare. They're everywhere, constantly presenting themselves. but most people can't see them because they lack the knowledge to recognize them as opportunities. When you continuously expand your knowledge, you start seeing possibilities everywhere. You start making connections that others can't make. You start creating opportunities rather than waiting for them to appear. Think about your own life. How many opportunities have you missed simply because you didn't know enough to recognize them? How many times have you looked back and thought, if only I'd known then what I know now? This is the cost of not investing in education. The cost isn't just what you spend, it's what you miss, what you never see, what you never become. And that cost is incalculably higher than any tuition or book price. So here's what I want you to do. Commit right now to becoming a serious student of life. Set up a learning system that works for you. Maybe it's reading for 30 minutes every morning before work. Maybe it's taking one online course every quarter. Maybe it's listening to educational podcasts during your commute. Maybe it's finding a mentor who can teach you skills you want to develop. The specific approach matters less than the commitment to continuous learning and the consistency with which you pursue it. Invest in yourself with the same seriousness that you would invest in any valuable asset. Buy the books, take the courses, attend the conferences, hire the coaches. Stop waiting until you can afford it and recognize that you can't afford not to. The return on this investment will exceed anything else you could possibly invest in because you're investing in the source of all value creation. You're investing in yourself, and unlike any external investment, this one can never be taken away from you. It travels with you wherever you go, appreciates constantly, compounds infinitely, and creates opportunities perpetually. This is the wisdom that has sustained prosperity through thousands of years of impossible circumstances. This is the principle that has allowed people to lose everything and rebuild repeatedly. This is the foundation of true security in an uncertain world. Not money, not possessions, not property, but knowledge, capability, wisdom. Make education your sacred investment and watch as everything else flows from that foundation. Become someone who knows, and you'll naturally become someone who has, because wealth is first, and always a state of consciousness, a quality of mind, a level of capability. Develop that, and prosperity becomes inevitable. Chapter 5. Chutzpah, the audacious courage that creates opportunity. There's a word in Yiddish that has no perfect English translation, a word that captures something essential about the prosperity consciousness we've been exploring. The word is chutzpah, and it means audacity, nerve, bold confidence that borders on impudence. It's the quality of asking for what you want without apology, of pushing boundaries without breaking them, of being willing to hear no 1,000 times because you know the 1,001st ask might be a yes. It's the courage to act when others hesitate, to speak when others remain silent, to try when others have already given up. And it's one of the most powerful prosperity principles you'll ever learn. Most people live their entire lives in a prison of politeness, afraid to ask for what they want, terrified of seeming pushy or aggressive, convinced that good things come to those who wait quietly and don't make wave. They watch opportunities pass by because they don't want to be that person who asks for too much, who reaches too far, who dares too boldly. They confuse being nice with being weak, confuse humility with invisibility, confuse respect with silence. And in that confusion, they surrender their dreams to the altar of other people's comfort. Chutzpah is the antidote to this paralysis. It's not about being rude or disrespectful. It's not about trampling over others or ignoring social norms. It's about having the courage to advocate for yourself, to create your own opportunities, to ask for what you deserve, to push for what you want. It's about recognizing that most doors don't open unless you knock, Most opportunities don't materialize unless you pursue them. Most success doesn't happen unless you boldly claim it. Let me tell you about Jacob, a young man who grew up in poverty, first generation in his family to go to college, working 3 jobs to pay tuition while everyone around him seemed to have it easy. He was smart, hard-working, dedicated, but completely invisible. He followed all the rules, did everything he was supposed to do, waited patiently for someone to notice his potential and give him a chance. Years passed, and nothing happened. He was stuck in entry-level positions, watching less qualified people get promoted around him, wondering why his hard work wasn't paying off. Then Jacob met a mentor who introduced him to the concept of chutzpah. You're waiting for permission that's never coming. The mentor told him, you're waiting for someone to discover you, but the world doesn't work that way. You have to discover yourself, and then make the world pay attention. The mentor challenged Jacob to start asking for what he wanted, boldly and directly. Ask for meetings with senior executives. Ask for opportunities to lead projects. Ask for introductions to influential people. Ask for feedback, for guidance, for chances to prove himself. And most importantly, don't take no as a final answer. Jacob was terrified. He'd been raised to be polite, to wait his turn, to not bother people with requests. But he trusted his mentor and decided to try. He started by asking for a meeting with his company's CEO, something that seemed audacious for someone at his level. His first request was ignored. His second was declined. His third was met with a polite brush-off. But on his 4th try, the CEO's assistant, impressed by his persistence, agreed to give him 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes turned into an hour-long conversation that transformed Jacob's career. The CEO was impressed by his courage, his preparation, and his willingness to put himself out there. Within 6 months, Jacob was working directly on strategic projects. Within 2 years, he was running his own division. What changed? Not Jacob's skills or qualifications. Those had always been there. What changed was his willingness to advocate for himself, to create his own opportunities through audacious courage. He learned that the people who succeed aren't necessarily the most talented or the most prepared. They're the ones who are willing to ask, to push, to try, to risk rejection in pursuit of what they want. This is the essence of chutzpah. It's the recognition that the world rewards boldness, that closed mouths don't get fed, that fortune favors the audacious. It's understanding that most people are so afraid of rejection that they never ask, which means the few people who do ask have a massive advantage. It's knowing that the worst thing that can happen when you ask is that someone says no. And that's exactly where you were before you asked, anyway. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Think about the greatest success stories in business, in arts, in any field. Almost without exception, they involve someone who had the chutzpah to try something that seemed impossible, to ask for something that seemed outrageous, to pursue something that everyone else said couldn't be done. Steve Jobs had the chutzpah to call Bill Hewlett as a 12-year-old and ask for spare parts for a project he was working on. That conversation led to a summer job at Hewlett-Packard. Oprah had the chutzpah to demand equal pay and ownership of her show when the networks wanted to keep her as just a host. That bold demand led to her becoming a billionaire. Sarah Blakely had the chutzpah to pitch her Spanx idea to Neiman Marcus executives directly, refusing to take no for an answer until they agreed to try her product. But here's what's crucial to understand. Chutzpah isn't just about big, dramatic moments. It's a daily practice, a consistent way of showing up in the world. It's having the courage to speak up in meetings when you have an idea. It's asking for the raise you know you deserve. It's negotiating for better terms instead of accepting the first offer. It's introducing yourself to people you want to know instead of waiting for formal introductions. It's proposing solutions to problems you see instead of complaining about them. It's volunteering for challenges that stretch you beyond your current capability. It's consistently putting yourself forward, making yourself visible, claiming your space in the world. Let me tell you about Rachel, a brilliant designer who was consistently overlooked for promotions because she was quiet and unassuming. She did exceptional work, but she never promoted herself, never highlighted her achievements, never asked for recognition. She believed that good work should speak for itself, that she shouldn't have to advocate for herself, that the right people would notice and reward her contributions naturally. But years passed, and she remained stuck, while louder, less talented colleagues advanced around her. Finally, frustrated and considering leaving her field entirely, Rachel decided to try a different approach. She started documenting her achievements and presenting them in regular meetings with her supervisor. She started volunteering to present her team's work to senior leadership instead of letting others take credit. She started asking directly for the projects she wanted to work on instead of waiting to be assigned. She started introducing herself to industry leaders at conferences instead of standing awkwardly in corners. It felt uncomfortable, almost painful at first. She worried she was being pushy, aggressive, too much. But something remarkable happened. People started taking her seriously. Opportunities started appearing. Within 6 months, she was offered a position at a prestigious firm that had never even known she existed before she started making herself visible. Her salary doubled. Her influence multiplied. And the most interesting part? The colleagues she'd been worried about offending actually respected her more. They admired her courage, her willingness to claim her worth, her refusal to hide her light under a bushel. This reveals something crucial about chutzpah. Most people respect it, even when it makes them uncomfortable. There's something compelling about someone who knows their value and isn't afraid to claim it, who asks for what they want without apology, who pursues their goals with bold determination. As long as you're not being cruel or dishonest, as long as you're treating people with basic respect, most people will actually admire your audacity, even if they wouldn't dare to emulate it themselves. But chutzpah also requires wisdom. It's not about being blindly aggressive or stupidly bold. It's about calculated courage, strategic audacity, intelligent risk-taking. It's knowing when to push and when to pause, when to be direct and when to be subtle, when to persist and when to pivot. It's having the confidence to be bold, combined with the wisdom to be strategic. This is why chutzpah is so powerful in Jewish culture. It's not just encouraged, it's also tempered by education, by values, by respect for wisdom and learning. Think about successful negotiations. The people who get the best deals aren't usually the ones who accept the first offer or who are afraid to ask for more. They're the ones who have the chutzpah to name what they want, to push back on terms that don't work for them, to be willing to walk away if necessary. They understand that negotiation is expected, that the first offer is rarely the best offer, that you have to advocate for yourself because no one else will. This applies to salary negotiations, business deals, contract terms, any situation where value is being exchanged. Let me tell you about Michael, an entrepreneur who learned this lesson the hard way. When he landed his first major client, he was so grateful and so afraid of losing the opportunity that he accepted whatever terms they offered. He underpriced his services dramatically, agreed to unreasonable deadlines, and basically allowed himself to be taken advantage of because he didn't have the chutzpah to advocate for fair terms. The result? He worked himself to exhaustion, barely made any profit, and the client didn't even respect him because he'd positioned himself as desperate and low value. The next time a similar opportunity came, Michael decided to try a different approach. He researched market rates thoroughly. He prepared a clear proposal outlining his value. He named his price confidently and didn't apologize for it. When the client tried to negotiate down, he didn't immediately cave. He acknowledged their concerns, explained his value clearly, and offered alternative solutions that maintained his boundaries. The client respected his professionalism, agreed to his terms, and the relationship was far more successful because it was based on mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. This is what chutzpah creates. It positions you as someone who knows their value, who expects fair treatment, who won't be taken advantage of. And paradoxically, this makes people want to work with you more, not less. Because everyone wants to work with someone who values themselves, who has standards, who demands excellence. No one actually respects the person who accepts crumbs gratefully. They respect the person who knows they deserve the whole meal and isn't afraid to ask for it. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about all the times you've held back, all the opportunities you didn't pursue because you didn't want to seem pushy, all the asks you didn't make because you were afraid of rejection. You're thinking about your conditioning, your upbringing, the messages you received about being modest and humble and not drawing attention to yourself. You're thinking about all the reasons why chutzpah feels impossible for you. But here's the truth. Chutzpah is a skill, not a personality trait. It's something you can develop through practice, starting small and building up. You don't have to transform overnight from timid to bold. You just have to start making slightly braver choices, taking slightly bigger risks, asking for slightly more than feels comfortable. Each time you do this, you expand your comfort zone. Each time you survive the discomfort of being bold, you build confidence for the next time. Each time you get a yes that you wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't asked, you reinforce the value of chutzpah. Start with low-stakes situations. Practice asking for small things that don't matter much but that require you to overcome your hesitation. Ask for a discount at a store. Ask to speak to a manager about improving service. Ask someone you admire for a brief phone conversation. Ask for feedback from someone whose opinion you value. These small acts of boldness build the muscle you'll need for bigger asks later. They teach you that asking doesn't kill you, that rejection isn't fatal, that most people are actually willing to help if you just have the courage to ask. Let me tell you about Lisa, a shy introvert who transformed her career through systematic chutzpah practice. She started by committing to ask one uncomfortable question every day. At first, these were tiny asks. She asked baristas to remake her coffee when it wasn't right, instead of just accepting it. She asked colleagues for help with tasks instead of struggling alone. She asked for clarification in meetings instead of pretending to understand. These small acts felt huge to her at first, but they gradually became easier. After a few months of daily practice, she started making bigger asks. She asked her boss for a raise. She asked a senior executive for mentorship. She asked to lead a major project. Within a year, her career had transformed completely. Not because she'd gained new skills, but because she'd developed the courage to claim opportunities that had always been available, but that she'd been too afraid to pursue. This is the power of chutzpah as a practice. It's not about being a naturally bold person. It's about systematically expanding your willingness to advocate for yourself, to create opportunities, to push boundaries. It's about recognizing that the life you want exists on the other side of the discomfort you're avoiding. and having the courage to walk through that discomfort repeatedly until it becomes your new normal. There's also a spiritual dimension to chutzpah that's worth understanding. In Jewish thought, there's a concept that you're obligated to develop and use your gifts, that hiding your light or playing small is actually a sin, because it means you're not fulfilling your purpose. From this perspective, chutzpah isn't arrogance, it's responsibility. It's recognizing that you have value to offer the world, and having the courage to offer it boldly, rather than hiding it away. It's understanding that your dreams and desires aren't random. They're guidance about what you're meant to create, and pursuing them boldly is how you fulfill your purpose. When you frame chutzpah this way, it becomes less about personal aggrandizement and more about service. You're not being pushy for your own ego. You're being bold because you have gifts to share, value to create, contributions to make. You're asking for opportunities not because you're entitled, but because you know you can deliver value. You're advocating for yourself not because you're selfish, but because you recognize that your success enables you to serve more people, create more value, make more impact. This shift in framing can be liberating if you've been held back by guilt or concerns about seeming self-centered. Chutzpah, in service of genuine value creation, isn't arrogance, it's responsibility. Chutzpah, in pursuit of meaningful contribution, isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. When you ask boldly for what you want, when you pursue opportunities aggressively, when you advocate for yourself courageously, you're not being a bad person. You're being someone who takes their purpose seriously, who refuses to let fear diminish their potential impact, who has the audacity to believe they can make a difference. So here's what I want you to do. Identify one thing you've been wanting to ask for, pursue, or try, but haven't because you've been afraid or hesitant or worried about seeming pushy. It might be a conversation you need to have, an opportunity you want to pursue, a boundary you need to set, a request you need to make. Whatever it is, commit to doing it within the next week. Not perfectly, not without fear, but courageously despite the fear. Take the action that your timid self has been avoiding. Make the ask that your modest self has been suppressing. Pursue the opportunity that your cautious self has been rationalizing away. And when you do this, pay attention to what happens. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that most people respond better than you feared. Notice that even if you get a no, you survive it, and you're exactly where you were before, except now you know instead of wondering. Notice how each act of boldness makes the next one easier. Notice how your confidence grows, how your sense of possibility expands, how your life starts changing in ways that wouldn't have been possible without your willingness to be audacious. This is the gift of chutzpah. This is the courage that creates opportunities where none seemed to exist. This is the boldness that has allowed Jewish people to thrive in hostile environments, to succeed despite barriers, to create prosperity against impossible odds. And this is the quality you can develop in yourself, starting today, starting now, starting with one brave ask, one bold action, one courageous step beyond your comfort zone. The life you want is waiting for you to claim it. All you need is the chutzpah to reach out and take it. Chapter 6, Tikkun Olam, Prosperity Through Purpose. There's a fundamental question that separates those who build lasting prosperity from those who chase fleeting wealth. Why? Why do you want abundance? What will you do with it? What difference will it make? Most people never ask themselves these questions seriously. They want money because they think it will make them happy, secure, or free. But money without meaning is empty. Wealth without purpose is hollow. Prosperity disconnected from contribution and eventually becomes a burden rather than a blessing. This is why one of the most powerful Jewish concepts for creating sustainable abundance is tikkun olam, which translates to repairing the world. Tikkun olam is the idea that you have a responsibility to make the world better than you found it, to contribute to healing what's broken, to participate in the ongoing work of creation and improvement. It's not charity as an afterthought or guilt-driven giving. It's purpose as the foundation of everything you do, including your pursuit of prosperity. It's the recognition that the deepest fulfillment and the greatest abundance come not from taking, but from giving, not from accumulating, but from contributing, not from personal gain, but from collective elevation. Let me tell you about Benjamin, a man who built a highly successful tech company and became wealthy beyond his wildest dreams by his mid-30s. From the outside, he had everything: money, status, freedom, options. But inside, he felt empty. He'd achieved his goals, but the achievement felt meaningless. He could buy anything he wanted, but nothing brought lasting satisfaction. He was successful by every external measure, but miserable by every internal one. He came to me confused and depressed, wondering what was wrong with him, why success felt so hollow. I asked Benjamin a simple question: what's your life about beyond yourself? He looked at me blankly. He'd never really considered it. His entire focus had been on building his company, making money, achieving success. The idea that his life needed to be about something larger than his personal gain had never occurred to him. So I introduced him to the concept of tikkun olam, to the idea that prosperity without purpose is poverty of the soul, that wealth without contribution is ultimately worthless. Benjamin started exploring what he cared about beyond himself, what problems in the world disturbed him enough to want to solve them. He discovered a passion for education access, for helping kids from backgrounds like his own get opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. He started a foundation that built schools in underserved communities. He personally mentored young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. He restructured his business to create pathways for people without traditional credentials to enter the tech industry. And something extraordinary happened. The more he focused on contribution rather than accumulation, the more abundant his life became. Not just financially, though his business continued to thrive, but in meaning, fulfillment, relationships, impact, joy. This is the paradox of tikkun olam. When you make your prosperity about something larger than yourself, when you connect your wealth building to genuine contribution, you align yourself with a flow of abundance that's exponentially greater than what you can create for yourself alone. You tap into something that the great spiritual traditions have always taught. You find your life by losing it. You receive by giving. You prosper by serving. This isn't feel-good spiritual bypassing. This is practical wisdom about how the universe actually works, about how energy flows, about what creates sustainable abundance versus temporary gain. Think about the most admired wealthy people in the world. They're not the ones who accumulated the most and held on to it tightly. They're the ones who built wealth in service of something meaningful, who used their prosperity to make genuine contributions. Bill Gates is respected not because he was once the richest man in the world, but because he's dedicating his wealth to eradicating disease and improving education. Oprah is beloved, not just because she's successful, but because she's used her platform to elevate others, to tell important stories, to create opportunities for people who wouldn't otherwise have them. Warren Buffett is admired not just for his investment acumen, but for his commitment to giving away the vast majority of his wealth to causes that matter. These people understand something fundamental. Purpose is the ultimate multiplier. When your work serves something beyond your personal gain, you unlock levels of energy, creativity, and persistence that are simply unavailable to purely self-interested motivation. You also attract better partners, better opportunities, better support, because people want to be part of something meaningful. They want to contribute to something that matters. When you're building wealth connected to genuine purpose, you're offering people the chance to be part of something significant, and that's magnetic in ways that purely profit-driven ventures never are. Let me tell you about Sarah and David, a couple who started a business with Tikkun Olam as their foundation. They created a coffee company that sourced exclusively from farmers in developing countries, paying fair wages and reinvesting profits into building schools and healthcare clinics in the communities they worked with. On paper, this seemed like a terrible business model. They had higher costs than competitors, lower margins, more complexity. Every business advisor they consulted told them they were being impractical, that they should focus on profit first and philanthropy later. But something unexpected happened. Customers were willing to pay premium prices because they knew their purchase was making a real difference. Employees were willing to work for lower salaries because they felt part of a meaningful mission. Suppliers went above and beyond because they trusted the company's integrity. Investors were attracted to the authentic purpose and long-term vision. Within 5 years, the company was wildly successful, not despite its commitment to Tikkun Olam, but because of it. The purpose wasn't a constraint on profit. It was the engine of profit, the thing that made everything else possible. This reveals something crucial about how Tikkun Olam works in practice. It's not about sacrificing prosperity for purpose or compromising your financial success for social good. It's about recognizing that genuine purpose and sustainable prosperity are inseparable, that the most successful businesses and the most fulfilled lives are always built around meaningful contribution. When your why is big enough and genuine enough, the how takes care of itself. When your purpose is clear and compelling, resources flow toward it naturally. But here's what's essential to understand. Your Tikkun Olam doesn't have to be some grand, world-changing mission. It doesn't have to be founding a non-profit or solving global poverty. It can be as simple as doing your work with excellence and integrity, serving your clients or customers genuinely, creating jobs that treat people with dignity, contributing your unique gifts in ways that make life better for the people around you. The key is that you're thinking beyond yourself, connecting your prosperity to contribution, making your work about something larger than personal gain. Think about a restaurant owner who decides their Tikkun Olam is creating a place where people experience genuine hospitality and connection, where employees are treated with respect and paid fairly, where the community has a gathering place that enriches life. That's not solving world hunger, but it's meaningful contribution. Or a therapist whose Tikkun Olam is helping people heal from trauma so they can live fuller lives and break cycles of pain in their family. Or a teacher who sees education as their way of repairing the world, giving young people tools to build better futures. These are all forms of Tikkun Olam, all ways of connecting prosperity to purpose. Let me tell you about Marcus, a plumber who transformed his entire relationship with his work and his prosperity through Tikkun Olam. He'd been doing plumbing for 20 years, and he was good at it, but he felt like his work didn't matter, like he was just fixing toilets and making money. Then he had a shift in perspective. He started seeing his work as his way of contributing to Tikkun Olam. He wasn't just fixing plumbing. He was ensuring people had clean water, safe sanitation, comfortable home. He was solving problems that directly impacted people's quality of life. He was serving his community with practical skills that genuinely mattered. This shift in how he viewed his work changed everything. He started approaching each job with more care, more pride, more intention. He started treating customers like people he was genuinely helping, rather than just sources of income. He started training young people in his trade, seeing it as passing on valuable skills that would enable them to support themselves and serve others. He started looking for ways to serve people who couldn't normally afford plumbing services, doing pro bono work for elderly people and families in crisis. And paradoxically, as he focused less on making money and more on genuine contribution, his business thrived. His reputation grew, referrals multiplied, customers were willing to pay premium prices because they trusted his integrity and valued his service. This is what Tikkun Olam does. It transforms your relationship with your work from something you do to make money into something you do to make a difference. And that transformation changes your energy, your presence, your approach, your results. When you're working purely for money, there's always an underlying desperation, a grasping quality that people can feel, even if they can't name it. But when you're working to contribute, to serve, to repair what's broken in your corner of the world, there's a different quality. There's integrity, authenticity, genuine care, and people respond to that. They want to work with you, buy from you, refer you, support you. There's also a neurological dimension to this that's worth understanding. Research shows that when people engage in meaningful contribution, when they do things that benefit others, their brains light up in ways that create genuine fulfillment and motivation. The pleasure centers activate more strongly and sustainably than when they pursue purely self-interested goals. In other words, your brain is literally wired for contribution, designed to find its deepest satisfaction in making life better for others. Tikkun Olam isn't just a nice spiritual concept. It's alignment with how you're actually designed to function at the neurological level. This is why people who build prosperity around genuine purpose tend to sustain it better than those who chase money for its own sake. The motivation is deeper, more renewable, more resilient. When you're working purely for money, it's easy to burn out, to lose motivation when you hit obstacles, to wonder why you're working so hard. But when you're working to contribute to something meaningful, when your prosperity is connected to your purpose, you have access to energy and persistence that can carry you through anything. You're not just pushing yourself forward, you're being pulled by something larger than yourself. Let me tell you about Rebecca, a lawyer who spent the first 15 years of her career at a prestigious firm, making excellent money, but feeling increasingly empty. She was successful by every external measure, but she dreaded going to work. Then she made a radical decision. She left the firm and started a practice focused on helping people who'd been wrongly convicted get their cases reviewed and their lives restored. The work was challenging, often heartbreaking, and far less lucrative than her previous position. But for the first time in her career, she felt alive. She was using her skills for something that mattered, contributing to Tikkun Olam in a direct and meaningful way. What surprised Rebecca was that within a few years, her practice was actually thriving financially. High-profile cases brought attention and led to consulting opportunities. Other lawyers referred complex cases because they trusted her expertise and integrity. Organizations sought her out for board positions and speaking engagements. Her income eventually exceeded what she'd made at the prestigious firm, but more importantly, she had something money alone could never buy. The deep satisfaction of knowing her work mattered, that her prosperity was connected to genuine contribution, that her success was making the world incrementally better. This is the power of Tikkun Olam. It's not about sacrifice, it's about alignment. It's about connecting your prosperity to your purpose in ways that multiply both. It's about recognizing that the deepest abundance comes not from what you accumulate, but from what you contribute, not from what you take, but from what you give, not from how much you have, but from how much you matter. Now, I want to address something important. Tikkun olam doesn't mean you can't make money or that you should feel guilty about prosperity. In fact, the more prosperous you are, the more capacity you have to contribute. The Jewish tradition has never romanticized poverty or suggested that money is somehow spiritual evil. Quite the opposite. Prosperity is seen as a blessing that increases your ability to repair the world, to contribute to healing, to make a difference. The key is that the prosperity serves the purpose, rather than becoming the purpose itself. Think about your own life, your own work, your own pursuit of abundance. What's it about beyond yourself? What difference does it make? What would be lost if you didn't do what you do? These questions aren't meant to make you feel guilty. They're meant to help you discover the deeper meaning that will transform your relationship with prosperity and multiply your capacity to create it. Because when you know what you're building for, when you're clear on how your prosperity connects to contribution, everything becomes easier. The work feels lighter. The challenges feel worth it. The success feels fulfilling. So here's what I want you to do. Take some time to reflect seriously on your tikkun olam, on how you want to contribute to repairing the world. It doesn't have to be elaborate or revolutionary. It just has to be genuine and meaningful to you. What problems do you care about? What gifts do you have to offer? What would you want to be remembered for? What difference do you want your life to make? Let yourself feel the answers to these questions, not just think them. Let yourself connect with what genuinely matters to you beyond your personal gain. Then start aligning your pursuit of prosperity with that purpose. Maybe it means changing how you do your current work, approaching it with different intentions and energy. Maybe it means shifting what kind of work you do entirely. Maybe it means keeping your current work, but adding a dimension of contribution, volunteering your skills, mentoring others, supporting causes that matter to you. Maybe it means starting a business or project specifically designed to address something you care about. There's no single right way to live tikkun olam. There's only your way, the unique contribution you're here to make. What I promise you is this: when you align your prosperity with genuine purpose, when you connect your wealth building to meaningful contribution, when you make your work about tikkun olam, everything changes, not just externally, though opportunities and abundance often multiply, but internally, where it matters most. You'll find energy you didn't know you had. You'll discover motivation that doesn't depend on external reward. You'll experience fulfillment that money alone could never provide. You'll build prosperity that's not just financially successful, but deeply meaningful. Not just personally rewarding, but genuinely contributive. This is the wisdom that has sustained Jewish prosperity through millennia. Not wealth for its own sake, but prosperity in service of purpose. Not accumulation as the goal, but contribution as the aim. Not taking from the world, but repairing it. Make this your foundation. Connect your abundance to authentic purpose. Live your life as an expression of tikkun olam, and watch as prosperity flows toward you in ways that are both materially abundant and spiritually fulfilling. This is the path to wealth that lasts, success that satisfies, and abundance that truly matters. Chapter 7. Generational Financial Management. Building wealth that transcends time. There's a fundamental difference between making money and building wealth. Making money is about earning income, paying bills, maybe saving a little if there's anything left over. Building wealth is about creating something that compounds over time, that grows beyond your individual lifetime, that provides for generations not yet born. Most people think in terms of months or maybe years. They're focused on this paycheck, this quarter, this year's results. But the Jewish approach to prosperity operates on a completely different time scale. It thinks in terms of decades and generations, building financial foundations that will serve children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren not yet conceived. This generational perspective changes everything about how you approach money. When you're thinking only about yourself and your immediate need, you make certain kinds of decisions. You spend what you earn. You chase short-term gains. You optimize for comfort today rather than security tomorrow. But when you're thinking about the legacy you're creating, when you see yourself as a link in a chain that extends far beyond your individual life, you make fundamentally different choices. You invest instead of spend. You build instead of consume. You plant trees whose shade you may never sit under because you understand that's what your ancestors did for you. Let me tell you about the Goldstein family, whose story perfectly illustrates this principle. The original Abraham Goldstein arrived in America in 1895 with nothing but his skills as a tailor and an unshakable commitment to building something that would last beyond his life. He worked 16-hour days, lived frugally, and saved every penny he could. But he didn't just save, he invested. He bought a small property in what was then an undeveloped part of Brooklyn. He educated his children not just in practical skills, but in financial literacy, teaching them about compound interest, real estate, the power of ownership versus renting. He established a family fund that every generation would contribute to and benefit from. When Abraham died, he left his children not just money, but a system, a set of principles, a framework for thinking about wealth that transcended any specific amount. His children followed the system. They worked hard, lived below their means, invested strategically, educated the next generation, contributed to the family fund. They bought more property. They started businesses. They created trusts. By the third generation, the Goldsteins were wealthy. By the fourth generation, they were establishing foundations. By the fifth generation, which includes members alive today, they're stewarding assets worth tens of millions of dollars, and more importantly, they're stewarding a tradition of financial wisdom that has compounded for over a century. What Abraham Goldstein understood is what most people miss. Wealth isn't really about money. Money is just the surface manifestation. Real wealth is the knowledge, the systems, the principles, the habits that generate money generation after generation. It's the financial literacy that gets passed from parent to child. It's the investment strategies that compound over decades. It's the business acumen that identifies opportunities. It's the network of relationships that creates possibilities. It's the values that prevent wealth from being squandered. All of this is the real inheritance, and it's far more valuable than any specific sum of money. Think about lottery winners, about people who receive large inheritances without the wisdom to manage them. Studies show that most lose everything within a few years. They have money without the consciousness to sustain it, wealth without the wisdom to steward it. They got the surface manifestation without the underlying foundation, and so the money disappears as quickly as it came. Contrast this with families who have sustained wealth for generations. They're not just passing down money. They're passing down financial education, investment principles, business networks, opportunities, and most importantly, the mindset and habits that create and preserve prosperity. This is why Jewish culture places such enormous emphasis on teaching children about money from a young age, not in a way that makes them obsessed with wealth or materialistic, but in a way that gives them the knowledge and skills they'll need to build and manage prosperity wisely. Children learn about earning, saving, investing, giving. They learn that money is a tool, not a god. They learn about compound interest, about ownership, about assets versus liabilities. They learn by watching their parents make financial decisions, by participating in family discussions about money, by gradually taking on more responsibility as they mature. Let me tell you about Rachel, a woman who grew up in a family that practiced generational wealth building. From the time she was 7 years old, she received an allowance that was divided into 4 jars: spending, saving, investing, and giving. She could spend her spending money on whatever she wanted, but her saving money went into a bank account she couldn't touch, except for significant purchases she'd planned for. Her investing money went into a custodial investment account, where she learned to track how it grew over time. Her giving money went to causes she chose to support. This simple system taught her fundamental financial principles that most adults never learn. By the time Rachel was a teenager, she was reading the business section of the newspaper with her father, discussing stocks and real estate markets, understanding basic financial concepts. When she went to college, she already had a small investment portfolio that she'd been building since childhood. When her friends were graduating with massive debt and no financial knowledge, Rachel graduated debt-free, with investments already compounding. By her 30s, she was financially independent. By her 40s, she was wealthy. And now she's teaching her own children the same principles, extending the chain of financial wisdom forward another generation. This is generational wealth building in action. It's not about being born rich. Rachel's family wasn't wealthy when they started these practices. They were middle class, sometimes struggling, but they had the wisdom to think generationally, to invest in financial education, to build systems that would compound over time. They understood that the greatest inheritance you can give your children isn't money, it's financial intelligence. They knew that teaching a child to earn, save, invest, and give wisely is worth more than leaving them a large sum they don't know how to manage. The principle of generational thinking also changes how you approach debt, spending, and financial decisions in general. When you're thinking only about yourself and your immediate desires, it's easy to justify debt for consumption, to spend money on things that depreciate immediately, to prioritize short-term pleasure over long-term security. But when you're thinking about the legacy you're creating, when you see every financial decision as either building or eroding the foundation for future generations, you become much more intentional and strategic. Let me tell you about David and Sarah, a couple who made a radical decision early in their marriage. They decided that every major financial decision would be evaluated through the lens of generational impact. Would this purchase build wealth or erode it? Would this investment serve only them or also their children and grandchildren? Would this choice teach the right lessons to the next generation? This framework led them to make choices that their peers thought were extreme. They lived in a modest house when they could have afforded something much larger. They drove used cars when they could have leased luxury vehicles. They took modest vacations when they could have traveled extravagantly. But here's what they did with the money they saved. They invested it, systematically, consistently, strategically. They bought investment properties. They built diversified portfolios. They started businesses. They created educational trusts for children not yet born. They established family traditions around financial education. And most importantly, they modeled for their children what it looks like to prioritize building over consuming, investing over spending, long-term wealth over short-term pleasure. Today, 30 years later, they have more wealth than most of their peers who earned similar incomes but spent what they made. More importantly, their children are financially literate, their grandchildren are being raised with healthy money habits, and the foundation they've built will serve generations they'll never meet. This is the power of generational thinking. It gives you patience that short-term thinkers lack. It gives you perspective that prevents panic during market downturn. It gives you discipline that keeps you from squandering resources on depreciating assets. It gives you purpose that makes the sacrifices feel meaningful rather than restrictive. You're not just building for yourself. You're building for a legacy that extends far beyond your individual life. Now, there's an important balance to understand here. Generational wealth building doesn't mean never enjoying your money or living so frugally that you're miserable. The goal isn't to accumulate resources you never use and die with the most money in the bank. The goal is to create sustainable prosperity that provides well for your life, while also building a foundation that will serve future generations. It's about finding the sweet spot between enjoying present abundance and ensuring future security. It's about spending wisely on things that truly matter while investing strategically in what will compound over time. Think about this practically. Generational wealth building means you have an emergency fund that covers 6 months to a year of expenses, so unexpected challenges don't derail your progress. It means you invest consistently in retirement accounts and other vehicles that will compound over decades. It means you think carefully about major purchases, distinguishing between investments that appreciate and expenses that depreciate. It means you acquire income-producing assets, like rental properties or businesses when possible. It means you avoid consumer debt, except for truly appreciating assets like carefully chosen real estate or education that dramatically increases earning capacity. Let me tell you about Marcus, a teacher who didn't earn a high income but who built substantial wealth through generational thinking. He and his wife lived modestly but comfortably on their teaching salaries. They saved 20% of every paycheck, which their peers thought was impossible on teachers' salaries. They bought a duplex instead of a single-family home, living in one unit and renting out the other so their tenants paid most of their mortgage. They invested their savings systematically in low-cost index funds and never touched them except to rebalance annually. They taught their children to work from young ages, to save portions of everything they earned, to understand the difference between assets and liabilities. After 30 years of this consistent approach, Marcus and his wife retired with over $2 million in net worth, despite never earning more than $60,000 a year. Their duplex had appreciated significantly and was fully paid off, generating rental income. Their investment accounts had compounded dramatically through decades of consistent contributions and reinvested dividends. More importantly, their children had absorbed the principles and were building their own wealth using the same strategies. Marcus hadn't just become wealthy himself. He'd established a family culture of financial wisdom that would serve generations. This reveals something crucial. You don't need a high income to build generational wealth. You need the right principles, the right habits, the right perspective. You need to think in terms of decades rather than days. You need to prioritize investing over consuming. You need to teach your children financial wisdom. You need to be patient enough to let compound interest work its magic over long periods. You need to resist the cultural pressure to look wealthy in favor of actually becoming wealthy. There's also a spiritual dimension to generational thinking that's worth understanding. In Jewish thought, you're not just an individual. You're a link in a chain that extends backward to your ancestors and forward to your descendants. You're a steward of resources that don't ultimately belong to you, but that you're responsible for managing wisely during your lifetime. This perspective creates a sense of responsibility that prevents the selfish squandering of resources. You're not just spending your money. You're spending resources that could serve your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. That awareness changes everything. Think about the choices you make today through this generational lens. That expensive car you're considering, would it be better to invest that money and let it compound for your children's education. That luxury vacation, or a down payment on rental property that will generate income for decades. That designer wardrobe, or investments that will provide for generations. I'm not suggesting you never enjoy your money, or that every dollar must be invested. I'm suggesting you bring consciousness to these decisions, that you balance present enjoyment with future security, that you think about the legacy you're creating with every financial choice. Let me tell you about Jennifer, a single mother who made a powerful decision when her daughter was born. She committed to saving just $50 a month in an investment account for her daughter, no matter how tight money was. Friends told her she couldn't afford it, that she needed that money for immediate expenses. But Jennifer understood generational thinking. She knew that $50 a month invested consistently at a reasonable return would compound to over $100,000 by the time her daughter reached adulthood. She knew she was giving her daughter something more valuable than toys or expensive clothes. She was giving her a financial foundation and teaching her the power of consistent investing. Jennifer's daughter grew up watching her mother make this monthly investment. She understood from a young age that her mother was building something for her future. When she turned 18, her mother gave her access to the account and explained everything she'd learned about investing over those 18 years. The daughter didn't squander the money. She let it continue to compound, added her own contributions, and started a similar account for her own future children. The $50 a month had multiplied in value far beyond the actual money. It had transmitted financial wisdom across generations. This is what generational wealth building looks like in practice. It's not always grand or dramatic. Often it's small, consistent actions sustained over long periods. It's the monthly investment that never stops. It's the financial education that happens around the dinner table. It's the family discussions about money that normalize talking about finances. It's the modeling of delayed gratification and strategic thinking. It's the establishment of traditions and systems that will outlast your individual lifetime. So, here's what I want you to do. Start thinking generationally about your financial decisions. Open investment accounts if you don't have them. Set up automatic monthly contributions, even if they're small. If you have children, start teaching them about money now, giving them opportunities to earn, save, invest, and give. If you don't have children, think about nephews, nieces, or young people in your community you could mentor financially. Create a family fund that multiple generations can contribute to and benefit from. Establish traditions around financial education and wealth building. Make decisions not just for your immediate benefit, but for the legacy you're creating. Think in terms of decades and generations rather than days and weeks. Ask yourself, what foundation am I building? What knowledge am I passing on? What opportunities am I creating for people not yet born? What legacy will I leave? These questions will transform your relationship with money from short-term consumption to long-term stewardship, from individual benefit to generational blessing. This is how families build wealth that lasts. This is how prosperity becomes sustainable across time. This is how you become not just wealthy yourself, but the founder of financial wisdom that serves generations beyond your lifetime. Start today. Think generational. Build accordingly. Create a legacy that will compound long after you're gone. Chapter 8. Community and Network. Social capital as your greatest treasure. There's a form of wealth that doesn't appear on any balance sheet, can't be deposited in a bank, and yet is often more valuable than any amount of money. It's the wealth of relationships, of networks, of community. It's knowing people who know people, being part of systems of mutual support, having access to opportunities through connections rather than just credentials. In Jewish culture, this form of wealth has been cultivated for thousands of years with the same intentionality that others apply to accumulating money. It's understood at the deepest level that who you know is often more important than what you know, and that your network is your net worth in ways that transcend simple financial calculation. This principle isn't about manipulation or using people. It's about recognizing that human beings are fundamentally social creatures, that we accomplish far more together than we ever could alone, and that prosperity flows through relationships as much as through individual effort. It's about building genuine connections based on mutual support, creating communities where everyone's success lifts everyone else, establishing networks of reciprocity where giving and receiving flow naturally in all directions. It's about understanding that isolation is poverty, regardless of how much money you have, and that rich relationships create rich lives in every sense of the word. Let me tell you about Samuel, who arrived in Los Angeles from Israel 30 years ago with $5,000, limited English, and no business connections in America. What he did have was an understanding of how networks create opportunity. His first priority wasn't finding a job or starting a business. It was building community. He found the local synagogue and started attending services, not for religious reasons primarily, but because he understood that's where he'd meet people. He volunteered for community projects. He helped people move, fixed their computers, connected people who could help each other. He showed up consistently, built genuine relationships, demonstrated his reliability and character. Within 6 months, Samuel knew dozens of people. Within a year, he knew hundreds. And here's what happened. Opportunities started flowing toward him naturally. Someone needed help with a project and thought of Samuel. Someone was looking to hire and asked if Samuel knew anyone, then hired him directly. Someone was starting a business and needed a partner they could trust. Someone had a property to rent and gave Samuel favorable terms because they knew his character. Within 2 years, Samuel had started 3 successful businesses, not because he had capital or credentials, but because he had community. His network became his greatest asset, creating opportunities that money alone could never have bought. This is the power of social capital, and it's one of the most consistent patterns you'll see in Jewish prosperity. There's a culture of mutual support, of helping each other succeed, of sharing opportunities and resources. It's not nepotism or exclusion. It's recognition that success is rarely solitary, that we rise together or not at all, that creating strong networks of reciprocity benefits everyone involved. When one person in the network succeeds, they help others succeed. When someone has an opportunity too big for them alone, they bring in others from the network. The rising tide lifts all boats, and everyone works to create rising tides. Think about how most people approach networking. They go to events when they need something, collect business cards, make superficial connections, and wonder why nothing comes of it. They think about networking as transactional, as something you do to get something you want. But that's not networking. That's soliciting. Real networking, the kind that creates genuine social capital, is about building authentic relationships over time, contributing before you need anything in return, being someone who connects others and creates value for your network. Let me tell you about Rachel, who transformed her entire career through strategic community building. She was a graphic designer struggling to find clients, sending out proposals and getting rejected or ignored. She felt invisible, stuck, frustrated. Then she made a decision. She would stop trying to sell her services and start building genuine community. She joined professional organizations and actually participated instead of just paying membership fees. She attended meetups and focused on learning about others rather than pitching herself. She started a weekly gathering at a coffee shop where designers could share work and get feedback. She connected people who could help each other. She featured other designers' work on her blog. She became known as someone who gave freely, who supported others, who created value for her community. Within 6 months, everything changed. She wasn't looking for clients anymore. They were coming to her, referred by people in her network who trusted her work and her character. She wasn't competing for opportunities anymore. She was being invited into collaborations. She wasn't struggling to prove her value anymore. Her reputation spoke for itself. Her network became a self-generating source of opportunity, credibility, and support. And the most interesting part? The more she focused on serving her community rather than selling to it, the more prosperous she became. This reveals something fundamental about how social capital works. It's built through giving, not taking. The people with the strongest networks are almost always the most generous members of those networks. They're the ones making introductions, sharing opportunities, offering help without expecting immediate return. They understand that social capital, like financial capital, grows through circulation rather than hoarding. Every time you help someone in your network, you strengthen that network. Every time you make a valuable introduction, you increase your value within the community. Every time you share an opportunity, you create reciprocity that will eventually flow back to you multiplied. There's a traditional Jewish practice called the chevra, which is essentially a mutual aid society. Groups of people commit to supporting each other through challenges, celebrating each other's successes, helping each other with everything from business advice to emergency funds to child care. These chevras create safety nets and opportunity networks that dramatically increase each member's capacity to weather storms and seize possibilities. When someone in the chevra needs help, the entire group mobilizes. When someone has an opportunity, they share it with the group. This creates resilience and prosperity that isolated individuals could never achieve alone. Let me tell you about the Diamond District in New York City, where billions of dollars in diamonds change hands daily, often with nothing more than a handshake and the word mazel, meaning luck or congratulations. This system works because of incredibly strong network bonds built over generations. Reputation is everything, and your reputation is maintained not just by your own actions, but by your family's actions, your community's actions. If you cheat someone, you're not just damaging prosperity, you're damaging entire network. This creates powerful incentive, integrity, and mutual support. The social capital is so valuable that no one wants to risk it for short-term gain. This is what strong networks create. Environments where trust reduces transaction costs, where reputation creates access, where relationships generate opportunities, where mutual support increases everyone's capacity. It's not about ethnic exclusivity or unfair advantages. It's about the simple power of people who trust each other working together toward mutual prosperity. Any group can create this, any community can build it, but it requires intentionality, consistency, and genuine commitment to mutual success. Now you might be thinking, this sounds great, but I don't have a ready-made community like that. I'm not part of a tight-knit ethnic or religious group. I don't have generations of network to draw on. How do I build social capital from scratch? The answer is exactly the way Samuel did, exactly the way Rachel did, the same way anyone does. You start where you are. You show up consistently. You give before you receive. You build genuine relationships over time, and you create value for your community. Here's a practical framework for building social capital intentionally. First, identify communities that align with your interests, values, or professional field. These might be professional associations, hobby groups, volunteer organizations, online communities, Neighborhood groups, anywhere people gather around shared interests or goals. Second, show up consistently. Don't just attend once. Become a regular, familiar presence. Third, contribute before you ask for anything. Offer help, share knowledge, make connections, solve problems, add value. Fourth, be genuinely interested in others. Learn about their challenges, their goals, their interests. Fifth, follow through reliably. Do what you say you'll do. Be someone people can count on. Sixth, facilitate connections within your network. Introduce people who could help each other. Let me tell you about Marcus, an accountant who used this framework to transform his practice. He joined his local chamber of commerce and actually participated. He volunteered to help small business owners understand their finances for free. He hosted workshops on financial literacy. He introduced business owners who could collaborate. He showed up at every event, remembered details about people's lives and businesses, followed up consistently. Within 2 years, his practice had tripled in size entirely through referrals from his network. He'd become the accountant that everyone recommended because everyone knew him, trusted him, and had seen him add value to the community consistently. The key insight here is that social capital is built through consistent, generous participation in community over time. It's not a quick fix or a shortcut. It's an investment that compounds, just like financial investments. The relationships you build today will create opportunities 5 years from now that you can't even imagine today. The reputation you establish through consistent reliability and generosity becomes an asset that opens doors throughout your life. The network you cultivate by genuinely supporting others becomes a source of support when you need it. There's also a crucial distinction between networks and networking. Networks are built through genuine relationship and mutual support over time. Networking is often transactional and short-term focused. Networks create lasting social capital. Networking creates superficial contacts. Networks are about community. Networking is about collecting business cards. Don't network, build networks. Don't collect contacts, cultivate relationships. Don't think about what you can get. Think about what you can give. Let me tell you about David and Sarah, a couple who moved to a new city where they knew no one. They decided to build community intentionally. They hosted monthly dinners, inviting neighbors, colleagues, and gradually friends of friends. They kept the format simple. Everyone brought a dish, everyone shared something about their life, and they facilitated introductions among guests who might benefit from knowing each other. After 2 years of monthly dinners, they'd built a network of over 100 people who knew each other through their home. This network became a source of friendships, business opportunities, support during challenges, and rich community life. The investment was minimal. The cost of dinner, once a month. The return was incalculable. A thriving network that enriched every aspect of their lives. This is what's possible when you approach community building strategically and generously. You're not just making friends, though friendship is valuable. You're creating a web of relationships that increases everyone's access to opportunities, resources, knowledge, and support. You're building social infrastructure that makes success more likely for everyone involved. You're establishing reputation and trust that become valuable assets throughout your life. Now let's talk about maintaining networks, because building them is only half the equation. Networks atrophy without maintenance. Relationships fade without attention. Social capital depreciates if not actively renewed. This is why you need systems for staying connected with your network over time. Maybe it's a monthly email update to your contact list. Maybe it's coffee meetings scheduled regularly with key relationships. Maybe it's reaching out when you see an article someone would find valuable. Maybe it's celebrating others' successes publicly. Maybe it's checking in during challenging times. The specific approach matters less than the consistency. Let me tell you about Jennifer, who maintains a spreadsheet of her network relationships. She categorizes them by closeness and importance, and she has a system for staying connected. Her closest relationships get monthly contact. Her important professional contacts get quarterly contact. Her broader network gets annual contact minimum. She tracks birthdays, major life events, professional milestones. This might sound mechanical, but it ensures that relationships don't disappear through neglect. She's not being fake or manipulative. She's being intentional about maintaining genuine connections that matter to her. And that intentionality pays enormous dividends in sustained relationships and ongoing opportunities. There's also the question of diversity in networks. The most valuable networks aren't echo chambers of people exactly like you. They include people with different backgrounds, different skills, different perspectives, different access to opportunities. A diverse network dramatically increases the range of possibilities available to you. It exposes you to ideas you wouldn't encounter otherwise. It gives you access to opportunities in different industries, different social circles, different geographical areas. Building a diverse network requires intentionally stepping outside your comfort zone, engaging with communities different from your own, being curious about people whose experiences differ from yours. Think about your current network. Who's in it? How diverse is it? How strong are the relationships? How much mutual support flows through it? How intentionally have you built it? Most people's networks are accidents of circumstance, co-workers, neighbors, people they happen to meet. But your network is too important to leave to chance. It's social capital that can be cultivated deliberately, invested in strategically, and leveraged ethically for mutual benefit. The question isn't whether you have a network. Everyone does. The question is, how intentionally are you building and maintaining it? So here's what I want you to do. First, audit your current network. Make a list of the people you know, categorizing them by relationship strength and potential mutual value. Second, identify gaps. What communities, industries, or types of people are missing from your network? Third, choose one or two communities to engage with consistently. Fourth, commit to adding value in those communities without expecting immediate return. Fifth, create systems for maintaining existing relationships so they don't atrophy. Sixth, facilitate connections within your network regularly, introducing people who could help each other. Remember, you're not building a network to use people. You're building community to create mutual prosperity. You're establishing relationships based on genuine care and support. You're contributing to others' success as a natural expression of abundance consciousness. When you approach networking this way, it stops feeling manipulative or transactional. It becomes an expression of the fundamental truth that we're interconnected, that your success and mine are not competing possibilities, but mutually reinforcing reality, that prosperity flows through relationships as naturally as water flows downhill. This is the wisdom that Jewish culture has understood for millennia. Community is wealth. Relationships are resources. Networks are net worth. The people who thrive across generations aren't usually the smartest or the most talented. They're the best connected, the most trusted, the most generous with their connections and resources. They've built social capital that creates opportunities, that provides support during challenges, that multiplies their individual capabilities through collective power. Make this your focus. Invest in relationships with the same seriousness you invest money, and watch as opportunities flow toward you through the networks you've built. Your greatest treasure isn't in your bank account. It's in your community, waiting to be cultivated, nurtured, and activated for mutual prosperity. Chapter 9. Resilience and Rebirth, the mindset that transforms crisis into opportunity. There's a question that reveals everything about someone's prosperity consciousness. What would you do if you lost everything tomorrow? Most people respond with fear, with despair, with the certainty that they'd be destroyed. But there's another possible response, one that has been forged through thousands of years of impossible challenges and miraculous recoveries. It's the response that says, I would start again, and I would rebuild, because I've never really had everything in the first place. What I have is something far more valuable than possessions or money. I have the consciousness that creates prosperity, and that can never be taken from me. This is the essence of Jewish resilience, the pattern that has allowed individuals and communities to lose everything repeatedly and rebuild each time, often becoming more prosperous than before. It's not optimism or positive thinking. It's something deeper, more practical, more powerful. It's a fundamental belief that circumstances are temporary, that loss is never final, that every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning, and that the capacity to create prosperity lives within you, regardless of what happens around you. This mindset is perhaps the most valuable prosperity principle of all, because it's what sustains you through the inevitable challenges, setbacks, and losses that everyone faces. Let me tell you about Miriam's grandfather, who lost everything not once but 3 times in his life. He'd built a successful textile business in Poland before World War II, employing dozens of workers, providing well for his family. Then the war came, and everything was taken, destroyed, lost. He survived the camps, emerged with nothing but his life, and started over in a displaced persons camp with literally 0 resources. Within 5 years, he'd rebuilt a small textile operation. Within 10 years, he was successful again. Then the business was destroyed by a fire that wasn't properly insured. Everything gone again and again. He started over. By the time he was 60, he'd rebuilt yet another successful business that supported his extended family and provided jobs for others. When Miriam asked him how he did it, how he found the strength to start over repeatedly, he said something profound. I never lost what mattered. They could take my factory, my money, my possessions, but they couldn't take my knowledge of textiles, my understanding of business, my relationships with suppliers and customers, my reputation for quality, my capacity to work hard and solve problems. These things traveled with me through every loss and every rebuilding. As long as I had these, I could always create prosperity again. This is the mindset of resilience, and it's built on several foundational beliefs that operate so deeply, they become almost instinctive. The first is this: you are not your circumstances. Your circumstances are temporary conditions that can and will change. Your identity, your capacity, your consciousness, these are what's real and permanent. When you identify with your circumstances, when you confuse having money with being valuable, when you think your possessions define you, then loss destroys you. But when you identify with your capacity to create, with your knowledge and skills, with your character and relationships, then loss is just a temporary setback, not a permanent defeat. The second foundational belief is that challenge creates capacity. Every difficulty you face and overcome makes you stronger, wiser, more capable. Problems aren't just obstacles to your prosperity. They're opportunities to develop the exact qualities that will enable greater prosperity. This is why people who've faced and overcome significant challenges often achieve more than those who've had easy paths. The challenges forced them to develop resilience, creativity, persistence, problem-solving abilities that become permanent assets. They learned lessons through hardship that can't be learned through success. Let me tell you about David, who lost his business during the 2008 financial crisis. He'd spent 15 years building a construction company, and in 6 months, it all collapsed. Projects were canceled, clients couldn't pay, the bank called his loans, and he lost everything, including his house. For the first few months, he was devastated, depressed, certain his life was over. But then something shifted. He realized that losing his business had actually freed him from a model that wasn't sustainable anyway. The crisis had forced him to see problems he'd been ignoring, to confront weaknesses he'd been avoiding, to develop skills he'd been neglecting. He spent the next year rebuilding himself before rebuilding his business. He learned new technologies, studied new business models, developed skills he'd always delegated to others. When he finally launched a new company, it was built on the lessons he'd learned through losing everything. Within 5 years, he was more successful than he'd been before the crisis. Within 10 years, he'd built something far larger and more sustainable than what he'd lost. The crisis hadn't destroyed him. It had reconstructed him into someone capable of greater success than he'd previously achieved. This is what resilience does. It transforms setbacks into setups for comebacks. It converts losses into lessons. It uses challenges as fuel for growth rather than excuses for giving up. And this mindset isn't genetic or fixed. It's learned, practiced, cultivated deliberately. You develop it by how you interpret difficulties, by the meaning you assign to setbacks, by the questions you ask when things go wrong. Do you ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Or, "What is this teaching me?" Do you ask, "Why did I fail?" Or, "What can I learn from this experience?" The questions you ask determine whether challenges destroy you or develop you. Think about the stories we tell ourselves about setbacks. Most people have a narrative of victimhood, a story where things happen to them, where circumstances determine their fate, where they're powerless against external forces. This narrative makes resilience impossible because it positions you as an effect rather than a cause, as someone who responds to circumstances rather than someone who creates them. But there's another narrative available, one where you're the protagonist of your story, where challenges are plot points that develop your character, where setbacks are temporary obstacles that make the eventual triumph more meaningful. Let me tell you about Sarah, who was fired from a job she'd loved and thought she'd retire from. She was 52, worried about age discrimination, terrified she wouldn't find anything comparable. The initial shock was devastating, but instead of collapsing into despair, she made a powerful decision. She would treat this as an opportunity to create something she'd always dreamed of, but never had the courage to pursue. She'd always wanted to start a consulting practice, but had stayed in corporate jobs for security. Now that security had been taken away, she had nothing to lose by trying. She spent 3 months preparing, learning about running a consulting practice, talking to people who'd done it successfully, building a plan. She leveraged every relationship from her corporate career, positioning herself as someone who could help companies with the exact challenges she'd spent decades solving. Within 6 months, she had more clients than she could handle. Within a year, she was earning more than her corporate salary. Within 2 years, she'd built a practice that gave her flexibility, fulfillment, and financial success beyond what her corporate job had provided. Getting fired hadn't ended her career. It had liberated her into creating the career she'd always wanted, but had been too afraid to pursue. This reveals something crucial about resilience. It's often easier to be bold after you've lost everything because you have nothing left to lose. When you're clinging to what you have, you're conservative, risk-averse, afraid to try anything that might jeopardize your current position. But when you've already lost it, when you're starting from zero, you're free to be audacious, to try the big ideas, to take the risks that create breakthrough results. This is why so many immigrant success stories involve people who lost everything and rebuilt. The loss forced them into the kind of bold action that creates exceptional results. There's also a practical dimension to resilience that's worth understanding. Resilient people don't just have better mindsets, they also have better systems. They diversify their income sources so no single loss destroys them. They build emergency funds that provide breathing room during crises. They maintain strong networks that can help during challenges. They continuously develop new skills so they're not dependent on any single capability. They stay financially conservative, avoiding debt that makes them vulnerable to economic downturns. All of these practical strategies increase resilience by reducing vulnerability. Let me tell you about the Friedman family, who built resilience into their financial structure deliberately. They never allowed themselves to be dependent on a single income source. The husband had his business, the wife had her career, and they also had rental properties generating income. They maintained an emergency fund covering a full year of expenses. They avoided consumer debt entirely. They invested conservatively in diversified assets. This approach meant they never had the newest cars or the biggest house, but it meant that when economic downturns came, when unexpected expenses arose, when one income source was disrupted, they were never in crisis. Their resilience wasn't just psychological, it was structural. This is important to understand. Building resilience isn't just about developing a tough mindset. It's about creating practical buffers and redundancies that give you room to maneuver when challenges arise. It's about not being so leveraged, so dependent on everything going perfectly, that any disruption becomes catastrophic. It's about building your life and your finances with enough slack that you can absorb shocks without collapsing. This combination of resilient mindset and resilient structure creates the capacity to not just survive challenges, but to use them as springboards for greater success. Now, there's an important distinction between resilience and stubbornness. Resilience means you keep going, but it doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing that isn't working. True resilience includes the wisdom to pivot, to adapt, to change strategies when circumstances change. It's not about blindly persisting with a failing approach. It's about maintaining your commitment to success while being flexible about the path. This is why resilient people often succeed. They combine persistence with adaptability, determination with wisdom, consistency with flexibility. Let me tell you about Michael, who had to close 3 businesses before his 4th one succeeded. Each failure taught him something crucial. The first business failed because he didn't understand his market well enough. The second failed because he undercapitalized and ran out of money before reaching profitability. The third failed because he chose the wrong partners. Each time, instead of giving up or repeating the same mistakes, he analyzed what went wrong, learned the lessons, and applied them to his next attempt. By the time he started his 4th business, he had a PhD in what doesn't work and a clear understanding of what does. That business succeeded spectacularly because it was built on lessons learned through failure. This is resilient intelligence, the capacity to extract wisdom from setbacks, to use failures as education rather than as reasons to quit. Every failed business, every lost job, every financial setback contains lessons that make you more capable of succeeding next time if you're willing to learn them. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges and losses, you will. The question is whether you'll use them to become wiser and stronger, or whether you'll let them defeat you. There's also something profound about how resilience transforms your relationship with fear. Most people are paralyzed by the fear of losing what they have, which keeps them from taking the risks necessary for significant advancement. But when you've developed genuine resilience, when you deeply know you can rebuild from nothing if necessary, that fear loses its power. You're free to take bigger risks because you're no longer terrified of loss. You know that the worst thing that can happen is you'll have to start over, and you're confident in your ability to do that successfully. Let me tell you about Rebecca, who left a secure six-figure corporate job to start a business in her 40s. Everyone thought she was crazy, giving up security for uncertainty. But Rebecca had developed something more valuable than job security. She had resilience. She knew that even if her business failed completely, she could always find another job or start another business. Her skills, her knowledge, her network, her work ethic, these weren't going anywhere. This confidence allowed her to take the risk that her risk-averse colleagues couldn't take. Her business succeeded, but even if it hadn't, she would have been fine because she had something more important than security. She had capability and resilience. This is the liberation that resilience provides. Freedom from the fear that keeps most people trapped in situations they've outgrown. When you know you can rebuild from nothing, when you're confident in your capacity to create prosperity regardless of circumstances, you're free to pursue opportunities that terrified you before. You're free to leave situations that don't serve you. You're free to take risks that could transform your life. Resilience isn't just about surviving challenges. It's about having the freedom to create the life you actually want. Now let me give you a practical framework for building resilience. First, work on your financial foundation. Build emergency savings, diversify income sources, minimize debt, invest consistently. Second, develop multiple skills so you're not dependent on any single capability. Third, maintain strong relationships and networks that can support you during challenges. Fourth, practice reframing setbacks as lessons rather than failure. Fifth, study stories of people who've overcome significant challenges to learn how they did it. Sixth, regularly challenge yourself with small difficulties to build your capacity for handling larger ones. Seventh, maintain your health, because physical resilience supports mental and emotional resilience. But perhaps most importantly, practice seeing yourself as someone who creates circumstances rather than someone who's victimized by them. Even when external events are beyond your control, your response is always within your control. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control what you make it mean and how you respond. This is the ultimate foundation of resilience. The recognition that you're never truly powerless, because you always have the power to choose your interpretation and your response. Let me tell you about the Jewish festival of Purim, which celebrates a story of near destruction and miraculous deliverance. The interesting thing about how this holiday is celebrated, it's one of the most joyous, festive occasions of the year, with costumes, parties, gift-giving, celebration. They're celebrating not just the deliverance, but the pattern it represents, the reality that danger and salvation are part of the same cycle, that every threat contains the possibility of triumph, that challenges are opportunities in disguise. This is resilience as culture, as worldview, as automatic response to difficulty. You can cultivate this same mindset. You can train yourself to see challenges as opportunities, setbacks as setups, losses as lessons. It takes practice, especially at first. Your default programming probably interprets difficulties negatively, as problems that shouldn't be happening, as evidence that something's wrong. But you can reprogram that default response. Every time you face a challenge, consciously ask, what's the opportunity here? What can I learn? How might this be helping me even though it doesn't feel like it? These questions literally rewire your brain over time, creating new neural pathways that interpret difficulty through the lens of resilience rather than victimhood. So here's what I want you to do. First, identify a current challenge or past setback and deliberately extract the lessons from it. What did it teach you? How did it make you stronger? What capacity did it develop? Second, create practical resilience in your life by building emergency funds, developing multiple skills, strengthening relationships, and minimizing financial vulnerability. Third, practice small challenges regularly to build your resilience muscle. Do hard things by choice, so you're stronger when hard things happen by chance. Fourth, study stories of resilience, especially within Jewish history, to see the pattern of loss and rebuilding are repeated successfully countless times. Remember this: you are not fragile. You are resilient. You have within you the capacity to overcome any challenge, to rebuild from any loss, to create prosperity, regardless of circumstances. This capacity isn't something you need to develop from scratch. It's already there, built into you through thousands of generations of ancestors who survived impossible odds and rebuilt repeatedly. All you need to do is activate it, trust it, rely on it. When you do, challenges stop being threats and become opportunities. Setbacks stop being endings and become beginning. Loss stops being failure and becomes liberation. This is the mindset that transforms crisis into opportunity, that turns obstacles into stepping stones, that makes resilience your greatest prosperity asset. Claim it now and watch how your entire relationship with challenge transforms. Chapter 10. Total Integration. Becoming a channel of infinite prosperity. You've journeyed through 9 chapters of prosperity principle, each one revealing a facet of the consciousness that has created and sustained wealth for thousands of years. You've learned about abundance consciousness, the power of strategic rest, the law of circulation, education as portable wealth, audacious courage, purpose-driven prosperity, generational thinking, the value of community, and the strength of resilience. But here's what you need to understand. These aren't separate techniques to apply occasionally. They're interconnected principles that must integrate into a complete system, a new operating system of consciousness that transforms not just what you do, but who you are. This final chapter is about integration, about weaving all these principles together into a coherent whole that becomes your natural way of being. It's about moving from knowing these concepts intellectually to embodying them so deeply that they operate automatically, unconsciously, effortlessly. It's about the transformation from someone who studies prosperity to someone who is prosperity, someone who doesn't chase abundance, but naturally generates it, someone who doesn't seek wealth, but becomes a channel through which infinite prosperity flows. Let me tell you about the moment everything changed for me. I'd been studying prosperity principles for years, reading books, attending seminars, learning strategies. I knew so much, but I wasn't prosperous. I was stuck in the same patterns, achieving the same limited results, frustrated by the gap between what I knew and what I experienced. Then I had a realization that transformed everything. I was treating prosperity as something external to acquire, rather than something internal to become. I was trying to get prosperity instead of being prosperity, and that fundamental misunderstanding was keeping me stuck. The shift happened when I stopped asking, "How do I get wealthy?" and started asking, "Who do I need to become?" I realized that prosperity isn't something you have, it's something you are. It's not a destination you reach, it's a frequency you embody. It's not about accumulating resources, it's about becoming the kind of person through whom resources naturally flow. This distinction changes everything because it shifts your focus from external circumstances to internal transformation, from doing to being, from achieving to becoming. Think about water flowing through a pipe. The water doesn't belong to the pipe, it flows through it. If the pipe is clear and open, water flows freely. If the pipe is blocked or constricted, flow is limited. You are the pipe, and prosperity is the water. Your job isn't to create the water. It's infinite and always available. Your job is to become a clear, open channel through which it can flow. And everything you've learned in this book is about clearing the blockages and expanding your capacity to channel abundance. The consciousness of abundance from Chapter 1 isn't just a nice idea. It's the foundation of everything. It's recognizing that the universe is fundamentally abundant, that there's always enough and more, that scarcity is an illusion created by limited perception. When this becomes your default operating system, when you genuinely believe in infinite abundance at the deepest level, everything else becomes possible. You stop competing and start collaborating. You stop hoarding and start circulating. You stop grasping and start allowing. This shift in consciousness changes your energy, your decisions, your actions, your results. Shabbat, the practice of strategic rest from Chapter 2, isn't about taking a day off. It's about rewiring your nervous system from scarcity's constant anxiety to abundance's peaceful trust. It's about proving to yourself every single week that your worth isn't your productivity, that you can stop and the world doesn't end, that there's always enough time, that rest creates more than constant striving. When this becomes a weekly practice, when you build this rhythm into your life permanently, you transform your relationship with work, time, worth, and security at the deepest neurological level. Tzedakah, the practice of systematic giving from Chapter 3, isn't about charity. It's about positioning yourself in the flow of abundance, about demonstrating trust that there's always more coming, about creating circulation that prevents stagnation. When you give consistently, especially when it feels uncomfortable, you're training your unconscious mind to operate from abundance rather than scarcity. You're affirming that you have more than enough. You're making yourself a channel rather than a dam. This practice, done consistently, literally rewires your prosperity consciousness. Education as sacred investment from Chapter 4 isn't about collecting degrees. It's about recognizing that your knowledge, skills, and capabilities are your only true wealth. The wealth that travels with you through every circumstance, that compounds infinitely, that creates opportunities indefinitely. When you commit to continuous learning, when you invest in yourself as seriously as you invest in anything else, you're building the foundation from which all external prosperity flows. You're not just acquiring information, you're expanding your capacity to create value, solve problems, recognize opportunities, and generate wealth, regardless of circumstances. Chutzpah, the audacious courage from Chapter 5, isn't about being pushy. It's about having the courage to claim your worth, to ask for what you deserve, to pursue what you want without apology. It's about recognizing that opportunities don't come to those who wait quietly, but to those who boldly pursue them. When you develop this quality, when you consistently act with courage despite fear, you transform your relationship with possibility. You stop letting opportunities pass by. You start creating your own luck. You become someone who makes things happen, rather than waiting for things to happen to them. Tikkun Olam, purpose-driven prosperity from Chapter 6, isn't about sacrificing wealth for meaning. It's about recognizing that the deepest abundance comes when your prosperity is connected to genuine contribution. when your wealth building serves something larger than yourself, when you align your pursuit of prosperity with authentic purpose, when you make your work about making a difference, you tap into energy and motivation that purely self-interested goals can never access. You also attract better opportunities, better partners, better support, because people want to be part of something meaningful. Generational thinking from Chapter 7 isn't about being wealthy enough to think about legacy. It's about operating on a time scale that transcends your individual life, about making decisions for the benefit of generations not yet born, about building systems that compound over decades. When you think generationally, you naturally make better decisions. You invest instead of spend. You build instead of consume. You create foundations that will serve long after you're gone. This perspective transforms your relationship with money from short-term gratification to long-term stewardship. Community and networks from Chapter 8 aren't about using people. They're about recognizing that prosperity flows through relationships, that your network is your net worth, that genuine community creates opportunities that isolated individuals could never access. When you invest in authentic relationships, when you contribute generously to your communities, when you build networks based on mutual support, you create social capital that becomes one of your most valuable assets. You're never truly alone in your pursuit of prosperity because you're surrounded by people who support your success and whom you support in return. Resilience, from Chapter 9, isn't about enduring suffering. It's about knowing that you can rebuild from anything, that circumstances are temporary, that your capacity to create prosperity lives within you, regardless of what happens around you. When you develop genuine resilience, when you've faced challenges and emerged stronger, when you know experientially that you can start over and succeed, you're freed from the fear that keeps most people trapped. You become willing to take bigger risks, pursue bigger opportunities, create bigger impact, because you're not terrified of loss. Now here's the integration. These aren't 9 separate practices. They're 9 facets of a single consciousness, 9 expressions of one fundamental truth. That truth is this: you are not separate from abundance. You are an expression of the infinite creative intelligence that generates all prosperity. Your job isn't to create abundance from nothing. It's to align yourself with the abundance that already exists, to become a clear channel through which it can flow, to remove the internal blockages that limit your capacity to receive and circulate wealth. Let me tell you about Thomas, a man who integrated all these principles into a complete transformation. When I first met him, he was struggling financially despite working hard. He was talented, educated, dedicated, but trapped in scarcity consciousness. Over 2 years, he systematically implemented every principle we've discussed. He reprogrammed his beliefs about abundance through daily practice. He established a Shabbat rhythm that transformed his nervous system. He started giving 10% of everything he earned, even when it felt impossible. He invested heavily in learning new skills. He developed the courage to ask for what he wanted. He connected his work to meaningful purpose. He started thinking in terms of legacy rather than immediate gratification. He built genuine community intentionally. He learned to see setbacks as opportunities. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months, his income had doubled. Within a year, he'd tripled it. Within 2 years, he'd created wealth he'd never imagined possible. But more importantly, he'd transformed who he was. He wasn't the same person who'd started the journey. He'd become someone for whom prosperity was natural, someone who operated from abundance rather than scarcity, someone who generated opportunities rather than waiting for them, someone who contributed meaningfully rather than just consuming. The external results were impressive, but the internal transformation was the real miracle. This is what's possible for you. Not overnight, not through magic, but through systematic integration of these principles until they become your natural operating system. It requires commitment, consistency, practice. It requires being willing to challenge beliefs you've held your entire life. It requires being willing to do things that feel uncomfortable, awkward, scary. It requires trusting the process, even when you can't see immediate results. But I promise you, if you commit to this path, if you implement these principles consistently, your life will transform in ways you cannot currently imagine. Here's how to begin the integration. First, commit to the journey. Make a decision that you're going to embody prosperity consciousness, that you're going to become someone through whom abundance flows naturally. This isn't a casual interest. It's a commitment to fundamental transformation. Second, start with the foundation, abundance consciousness. Spend time every day affirming that the universe is fundamentally abundant, that there's always enough, that you are worthy of prosperity, that wealth flows naturally to you. Let these affirmations sink deep into your unconscious mind through consistent repetition. Third, implement Shabbat, or some form of strategic rest. Choose one day, or at least several hours every week, where you completely stop productive activity. Use this time to rest, to be present, to celebrate, to reconnect with what matters beyond work. Let this practice rewire your nervous system from constant striving to peaceful trust. Fourth, establish tzedakah practice. Choose a percentage of your income, even if it's small, and give it away systematically before paying other expenses. Do this consistently, regardless of circumstances, trusting that circulation creates more abundance than hoarding. Fifth, commit to continuous education. Dedicate time every day to learning, growing, expanding your capabilities. Read books, take courses, develop new skills, study people who've achieved what you want to achieve. Sixth, practice chutzpah. Every day do something that requires courage, that pushes you beyond your comfort zone, that involves asking for something you want. Start small if necessary, but practice consistently until bold action becomes natural. Seventh, connect your prosperity to purpose. Get clear on your tikkun olam, on how you want to repair the world, and align your wealth building with that purpose. Eighth, start thinking generationally. Make financial decisions not just for your immediate benefit, but for the legacy you're creating. Start investing, creating systems, building foundations that will serve for decades. Ninth, build community intentionally. Choose communities to engage with, show up consistently, contribute generously, build genuine relationships based on mutual support. 10th, develop resilience. Face challenges as opportunities to grow stronger. Extract lessons from setbacks. Build practical buffers that make you less vulnerable to disruption. As you implement these practices, something will begin to happen. The principles will start integrating, connecting, reinforcing each other. Your abundance consciousness will make tzedakah feel natural. Your tzedakah practice will deepen your abundance consciousness. Your strategic rest will give you clarity about your purpose. Your purpose will give you energy that makes work feel effortless. Your chutzpah will create opportunities that your network helps you maximize. Your generational thinking will motivate you to keep learning. Everything connects. Everything reinforces. Everything compounds. Let me tell you what this integration feels like when it's working. You wake up feeling abundant, knowing there's always enough, trusting that opportunities are flowing toward you. You work with purpose and energy because your efforts serve something meaningful. You rest deeply without guilt because you know your worth isn't your productivity. You give generously without fear because you trust in infinite supply. You learn continuously because you're excited about expanding your capability. You ask boldly for what you want because you know you deserve it. You think in terms of legacy because you're building something larger than yourself. You're surrounded by community that supports and celebrates you. You face challenges with confidence because you know you can overcome anything. This is prosperity consciousness, fully integrated. This is what it feels like to be a channel of infinite abundance. This is your birthright, your natural state, what you were always meant to experience. Everything that's blocked this until now, every limiting belief, every scarcity pattern, every fear-based decision, these were just programming that can be overwritten. You're not broken, you're not limited, you're not destined for struggle. You're infinite, creative potential temporarily convinced of limitation. And now, you're remembering the truth. Here's what I want you to understand as we close this journey together. The prosperity you seek isn't somewhere out there waiting for you to find it. It's inside you, waiting for you to embody it. It's not something you chase. It's something you become. It's not something you achieve. It's something you allow. The infinite abundance of the universe is always flowing, always available, always ready to express through anyone who becomes a clear channel. You become that channel by integrating these principles until they're not things you do, but who you are. This is the secret that has sustained Jewish prosperity through 5,000 years of impossible challenges. Not techniques or strategies or external advantages, but consciousness, the deep knowing that abundance is infinite, that you're worthy of prosperity, that circumstances are temporary, that you can rebuild from anything, that wealth flows naturally when you align yourself with its source. This consciousness is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of your current circumstance. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. It doesn't matter what you've lost or failed at in the past. It doesn't matter what limitations you've believed until now. What matters is the decision you make right now. Will you continue operating from scarcity consciousness, believing in limitation, accepting struggle as your fate? Or will you make the commitment to transform, to integrate these principles, to become someone for whom prosperity is natural? This is the only question that matters, and only you can answer it. If you choose transformation, if you commit to this path, here's what I promise you. Your life will never be the same. Not because circumstances will magically shift overnight, though they often do shift faster than you expect, but because you will shift. You'll become someone different, someone who operates from abundance rather than scarcity, someone who creates opportunities rather than waiting for them, someone who channels prosperity rather than chasing it. And when you shift, everything shifts with you. The principles in this book aren't theory. They're tested wisdom refined through thousands of years of application across millions of lives. They work. They've worked for countless people before you. They're working for people right now, and they'll work for you if you work them, not through casual interest or partial implementation, but through committed, consistent, integrated practice until these principles become your automatic operating system. So here's my final invitation to you. Become prosperity. Not someone who has money, but someone who is abundance. Not someone who achieves success, but someone who embodies prosperity consciousness. Not someone who gets rich, but someone who becomes a channel through which infinite wealth flows naturally, blessing your life and everyone you touch. This is your destiny, your birthright, your truth. Everything else has been a dream of limitation that you're now waking up from. Take what you've learned and make it real. Implement these principles consistently. Practice them daily. Integrate them completely. Watch as your consciousness transforms. Watch as your results multiply. Watch as prosperity becomes your natural state. And then, when you've embodied these truths completely, when abundance flows through you effortlessly, share what you've learned with others. Become a channel not just for your own prosperity, but for collective elevation. This is Tikkun Olam at its highest expression, repairing the world by embodying and sharing the consciousness of infinite abundance. Your journey doesn't end with this book. It begins. Every principle you've learned is a doorway to deeper understanding, a practice to master, a consciousness to embody. Walk through these doorways with commitment and courage. The prosperity you seek is waiting, not somewhere out there, but inside you, ready to emerge the moment you align yourself with its infinite flow. Become the channel, embody the consciousness, live the principle, and watch as your entire world transforms into a reflection of the abundance that has always been your true nature. This is the Jewish secret to prosperity, and now it's yours. Use it wisely. Share it generously. Live it fully. Your time of unlimited abundance begins now.